Chapter 1000. After killing Dao Being Glass, Su Zimo had a grim expression and his heart was in turmoil. Although this battle was short, it was extremely dangerous and was even more difficult than he had imagined. Dao Being Glaze had practically already forced out all of his trump cards. He only managed to win by a narrow margin with the help of his sound domain secret skill, visual technique and top-grade dermic weapons such as the Creation Qinglian and Mingwang prayer beads. Su Zimo took out some external elixirs and sprinkled them on his mangled right hand. If not for the divine phoenix bone, his right hand would have been shattered long ago. At that time it would be unknown who would win. Under normal circumstances, given Su Zimo's regeneration capabilities, the injury on his right hand would be healed before long. However, with his blood qi suppressed, his regeneration capabilities were much lower and he had no choice but to rely on some elixirs to assist. He was way too affected in the Dao inheritance ground. Although Su Zimo had not seen Di Yin since he left Myriad Phenomenon City, however, he believed that Di Yin's strength was definitely above Dao Being Glass's. Even Dao Being Glass's most confident physique and melee combat strength were inferior to Di Yin. In that case, he had almost no chance of winning against Di Yin. Disregarding Din, the combat strength of titular disciples was similar. If there was another titular disciple, there was a high chance that he would be the one to die just now. I have to reach the Three Tribulations domain as soon as possible. Su Zimo felt a sense of danger, as though he had a sudden impulse and was uneasy. He put away Dao Being Glass's storage bag and summoned the Creation Qinglian. At the same time, he held the rainbow-glazed pagoda in his palm and observed it for a moment. The rainbow-glazed pagoda was a rare treasure that could fight head-on against the Grade 5 Creation Qinglian, without being disadvantaged. Unfortunately, this was Dao Being Glass's destiny dermic weapon. Although he was already dead, the spirit consciousness imprint on the destiny dermic weapon was still there. Su Zimo tried to control it, but there was no reaction. He had to erase the spirit consciousness imprint on it before he could make the rainbow-glazed pagoda his. This would take a long time. In the Dao inheritance ground, Su Zimo did not have the time at all. He placed the rainbow-glazed pagoda in his storage bag and sped through the crowd into the distance. The cultivators that had gathered here gradually dispersed. Not long after, a bolt of lightning flashed in the distance and arrived with the wind. In the blink of an eye, it had already arrived. The person was dressed in a Taoist robe and his body shone with crackling green lightning. His entire appearance was drowned by the lightning and was blurry. He wore a Taoist crown on his head, cloud-ascending boots on his feet, and a purple gold belt around his waist. He had a dignified expression, and his gaze was like lightning as he surveyed his surroundings. The emblem of Zephyr Thunder Palace was emblazoned on the sleeves of that person's robes. Dong! Right then, a strange sound echoed from afar, as though it could disrupt a cultivator's mind and bloodline. Suddenly, a figure appeared on the horizon in the distance. He held a wooden fish in his hand and walked over step by step. Dong! The sound of the wooden fish rang out again. This person's speed seemed to be extremely slow, but when the second sound of the wooden fish rang out, this person had already arrived. Bald head and monk robes. Monk Formless, you're here too. The cultivator shimmering with green lightning looked at the approaching monk and greeted him. Patron Zephyr Thunder, how have you been? The monk with the wooden fish lowered his gaze with a calm expression. If other cultivators were to hear that conversation, it would cause a huge commotion. The two titular disciples of Formless Monastery and Zephyr Thunder Palace were gathered here. Suddenly, both of their expressions changed and they turned over in unison. At that moment it was daytime. However, in the distant firmaments, stars appeared one after another in a bedazzling manner. Beneath the starry skies a figure strode over. He wore dark golden Taoist robes and was bathed in starlight. His eyes were even brighter than the stars in the firmaments and he had a faint smile on his face. Looking at the person who had arrived, Dao Being Zephyr Thunder said indifferently, "To think that the battle between Glass and Su Zimo would alarm you." Dao Being Heavenly Dipper. The person who had arrived was the titular disciple of Heavenly Dipper sect. Unfortunately, you guys are already too late. Fufu, he. Suddenly, a burst of laughter sounded in the void. The voice was erratic and it was impossible to tell if it was a man or a woman. The strange thing was that this place was vast and spacious. Apart from the three of them, there was no one else. The expressions of the three titular disciples present did not change, as though they had already sensed it. "You're here for him as well?" Dao being Zephyr Thunder asked with a frown. "Why? You don't want me to interfere?" The voice asked in return with a mocking tone. Glass was the one who wanted to show off and tried to kill Su Zimo alone. In the end he died. Is that person really that strong? A playful look flashed through Dao being Heavenly Dipper's eyes as he asked with a smile. "I heard that he's only at the nascent soul realm." "He's very strong," suddenly Monk Formless spoke. "If not for the fact that his demonic methods were suppressed in the Dao inheritance ground, none of us would be a match for him." That might not be the case. Dao being Heavenly Dipper shook his head and chuckled. As titular disciples, all of them were prideful. Furthermore, he had fought Shuriyen Baichen to a drawback then. Wu Xiang's words make sense. Dao being Zephyr Thunder said in a deep voice, "If that's not the case, why would Diyin choose this place as the battlefield?" This question instantly silenced the crowd. There was only a single explanation for Diyin's choice. Even he was wary of Su Zimo in his peak condition. The reason why he chose the Dao inheritance ground as the battlefield was to restrict Su Zimo and suppress Su Zimo's combat strength. After a long silence, Dao being Heavenly Dipper smiled gently and said to the void, "Even so, the combined strength of me, Zephyr Thunder and Formless is enough. No matter how strong Su Zimo is, he won't be able to escape death." "Is that so?" The erratic voice sounded once more. "I received news that 3 titular disciples of the Fiend Sects have entered the Dao inheritance ground. One of them happens to be Su Zimo's best friend. If she joins forces with Su Zimo, even if she can't defeat the 3 of you, it won't be difficult for her to help him escape." Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the other 2 fell silent. If Su Zimo had another titular disciple by his side, it would indeed be troublesome. Their goal was to kill Su Zimo, not defeat Su Zimo. "Don't worry, I don't want any of the treasures on Su Zimo. What I want is his life." The voice in the void sounded with a chilling killing intent that sent chills down one's spine. "All right." Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the other 2 exchanged glances and nodded. "TSK, TSK, TSK." Right then, a sinister laughter sounded from the depths of the ground. Boom! With a loud bang, a pale palm appeared from the depths of the ground. Gravel scattered and soil churned as a figure burrowed out from the ground. "Since that's the case, wouldn't it be safer to have me as well?" The person was dressed in black robes and was as thin as firewood. His face was pale and his eyes were deeply sunken, resembling a malevolent ghost from hell. "Earth malevolence?" Dao being Zephyr Thunder frowned. Dao being Heavenly Dipper chuckled. "Seems like this Su Zimo is truly dead for sure to be surrounded by so many titular disciples. Where is that person now? How should we lure him out?" Dao being Zephyr Thunder asked with a frown. The voice in the void sounded once more. "That person is the most sentimental. I have a plan that can make him walk right into our trap." Chapter 1001. Su Zimo wanted to reach the 3 Tribulations domain as soon as possible and sprinted the entire way without stopping. About 2 hours later, a huge area of ice and frost appeared on the horizon in the distance. It connected the sky and the earth, and the cold wind whistled inside, emitting a woo-woo sound. A large number of cultivators lingered near the frost region. Every cultivator looked up at this area, their faces filled with shock. Some of them looked hesitant, some stopped in their tracks, and some had already mustered their courage to barge in. However, that person had only taken half a step in when he shrieked and retreated. His thigh was filled with wounds, but the most terrifying thing was that these wounds had already been frozen, and not a single drop of blood flowed out. That person's leg was covered in frost and was already frozen. In the crowd, a cultivator sneered and pouted his lips. "Humph, you overestimate yourself. Do you really think that anyone can try the extreme northern wind?" "Fellow Taoist, may I ask what the background of the extreme northern wind is?" a cultivator at the side asked. That person glanced at the cultivator beside him and cleared his throat before saying slowly, "There are still many unknown places in Tianhuang mainland. Legend has it that the extreme north is one of them. Bone-chilling winds blow there for 10,000 years and glaciers are everywhere. Even conjoint body mighty figures don't dare to venture deep." The extreme northing wind is only the outermost wind of the extreme north. Even so, its power is shocking. You saw it earlier on as well. If that person had walked half a meter in, he would have died. So scary. The cultivator who asked the question grimaced slightly and shuddered. The red lotus karmic fire of the second stage is even more terrifying. Triggered by a cultivator's greed, anger and obsession, it bursts out from the body and burns one's flesh, bones, essence chi, dermic powers and even essence spirit. It's excruciating. Throughout history, there have been countless paragons who died to the red lotus karmic fire. I heard that throughout history, no one has been able to clear the three tribulations domain. What? Not a single person? I heard from the seniors of the sect that there are people who can transcend the wind and fire tribulations. However, no one can transcend the third thunder tribulation. I heard that the final heavenly tribulation is also known as the heavenly tribulation of the Tao heart. If one's Tao heart isn't stable, then a single heavenly tribulation of the heavenly tribulation can blast one into pieces. Standing not far away, Su Zimo listened to the discussions of the surrounding cultivators and gained a better understanding of the three tribulations domain. Su Zimo took a deep breath and walked towards the three tribulations domain. Have you heard? The titular disciple of Glass Palace fought with Su Zimo, and in the end, Taoist Glass perished. To think that Su Zimo would still be able to kill titular disciples despite being suppressed to such an extent. As expected of the number one monster incarnate in history. It's useless. This person won't live for long. I heard that the titular disciples of Zephyr Thunder Palace, Formless Monastery and Heavenly Dipper sect are already prepared to join forces to kill him. What's the use of that? That Su Zimo isn't a fool. If he knows that they're teaming up, he can just avoid them. Fufu, you don't know about that, right? The cultivator laughed. The titular disciple of Pure Maiden sect has already entered the Tao inheritance ground. She's best friends with Su Zimo and initially wanted to help him. However, she was captured by the three titular disciples and is waiting for Su Zimo to walk right into their trap. Su Zimo had just arrived at the edge of the three tribulations domain and could not help but stop in his tracks when he heard the discussion. The titular disciple of Pure Maiden sect is my best friend. Could it be? Su Zimo frowned. He was most likely doomed for coming to the Tao inheritance ground to accept the challenge. At this moment, anyone who dared to stand out to help him would definitely be in danger. No matter how he thought about it, there was a possibility that Demoness G would do something as foolish as that. The discussion on the other side continued. The titular disciple of Pure Maiden sect is that Demoness from the Fiend sex? That's her. I heard that the three titular disciples of Zephyr Thunder Palace only gave Su Zimo half a day's time. If they don't see him after half a day, they'll kill Tao being Pure Maiden. If I were Su Zimo, I definitely wouldn't go. Wouldn't that be equivalent to courting death? The moment that person said that, a figure flashed before him and in the blink of an eye, another person appeared. What's the surname of the Tao being Pure Maiden you guys are talking about? Su Zimo asked. The cultivator focused his gaze and saw that the person was dressed in green robes. His eyes were clear and he was handsome. Although his cultivation was only at the nascent soul realm, he spoke rudely. That person sneered and rolled his eyes, pursing his lips. Who do you think you are? Why should I tell you? All of a sudden, that person felt his body lighten and was lifted up by Su Zimo by the throat. Su Zimo's gaze was cold as he said coldly, I'll ask again, what's the surname of Tao being Pure Maiden? If you don't tell me, I'll crush your throat. Fufu, with his throat gripped, that person could not muster any strength at all. His face flushed red as he glared fiercely at Su Zimo with a ferocious glint. However, he grit his teeth and remained silent. This person looks familiar. He seems to be Su Zimo. It's Su Zimo. Right then a series of exclamations sounded from the crowd. Many cultivators had witnessed the two battles in the Tao inheritance ground and naturally recognized Su Zimo. Initially, the cultivator wanted to launch a spirit consciousness attack to fight. However, when he heard the word Su Zimo, he was scared out of his wits. I will speak. That person tried his best to open his mouth and a few words popped out from the depths of his throat. I heard that her surname is G. Su Zimo continued asking, Where are they? That person straightened his arm and pointed in a direction. Su Zimo tossed that person to the ground casually and sped in that direction in a flash. When he heard that Demoness Ji was in danger, Su Zimo did not hesitate at all. Even though he knew that the 3 titular disciples were waiting for him, and that he would most likely be doomed, he had to go. In reality, for Su Zimo, the wisest, safest and most beneficial decision right now was to challenge the 3 Tribulations domain. However, everything was unknown in the 3 Tribulations domain and Demoness Ji would die half a day later. Demoness Ji was also a titular disciple. Perhaps Dao being Zephyr Thunder, and the other titular disciples were wary and did not dare to kill her. However, Su Zimo did not dare to take the risk. Even if it was a mountain of blades, a sea of flames, the gates of hell or Acheron's path ahead, he had to charge through. Since Demoness Ji was willing to take the risk to enter the Dao inheritance ground for him, no matter what, he had to protect Demoness Ji without hesitation. If he was afraid of death for the sake of his Dao, he would not be Su Zimo. Hurry and follow. There's definitely going to be an unprecedented battle. This time all the grudges have to be resolved. Many cultivators howled excitedly and followed behind Su Zimo, sprinting in that direction. Su Zimo is going. In order to save the pure maiden of the fiend sex, Su Zimo is going to fight the 3 titular disciples. News spread one after another and more cultivators gathered over with a huge commotion. Chapter 1002. Su Zimo sped at lightning speed and the wind howled in his ears. His black hair danced and killing intent surged in his eyes. Suddenly his heart skipped a beat, and he took out a jar of strong alcohol from his storage bag. He was a scholar to begin with and did not drink alcohol. His brother, Su Hong, was a soldier who fought on the battlefield and loved strong alcohol the most. Therefore, he had a few jars of alcohol in his storage bag at all times. At that moment, for some reason, he suddenly wanted to drink a jar of alcohol. Slapping open the mud seal, the fragrance of alcohol filled the air. Su Zimo raised the wine jar and drank heartily. Some alcohol flowed from the corner of his mouth and splattered on his chest, but he did not notice it. The scorching alcohol slid down his throat and rolled into his stomach, turning into a scorching aura that surged through his body. Ha 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 ha. Su Zimo reared his head and laughed. Throwing down the wine jar casually, he shouted in his drunkenness, "Good, good. Titular disciple? Diin? Come and fight." Su Zimo was filled with heroism and his eyes lit up as he strode forward. The cold wind blew against his face but the blood in his body burned hotter. Before long there was a black mass ahead. It was unknown how many cultivators were gathered there. Su Zimo flew through the air and looked down from above. He could see that in the middle of the crowd was a huge empty space that was spacious. In the empty space, there was a stone statue of a female cultivator. She had a slim figure with slender shoulders and a slender waist. She had beautiful brows and an ethereal appearance. Although it was only a stone statue, it was lifelike and ripples appeared beneath her feet, as though she was treading on waves. She was graceful like a swimming dragon, and could be said to be peerless in her generation. It was obvious that this stone statue was a legacy left behind by a mighty figure of an immortal sect. Beneath the stone statue stood a cultivator in dark golden robes. He had one hand behind his back and was elegant and handsome. His eyes were like stars as he looked at the fairy stone statue with an infatuated expression. I wonder what sort of person she is. Even a legacy stone statue has such elegance. The cultivator murmured softly, "It's truly the greatest regret of my life that I can't be born in the same generation as such a beauty." Su Zimo's gaze landed on the person's sleeve. The symbol of Heavenly Dipper sect. Taoist Heavenly Dipper. Su Zimo's eyes turned. Opposite this person there was a huge smooth blue stone. A monk in plain robes was sitting on it. His brows were lowered and his eyes were half closed. He held a wooden fish in his left hand and a wooden mallet in his right, striking it repeatedly. Monk formless. There were 2 more people standing between the 2 titular disciples. At the very front was a young girl in a pink dress. Her body was bound by a rope as thick as a finger, outlining her alluring figure and emitting a seductive aura. The young girl's appearance was absolutely beautiful, bright and flawless. But at this moment the young girl's eyes were watery, as if she was crying. The tears on her face had not dried, making one feel pity for her. Demoness Ji. Su Zimo recognized him at a glance. Behind Demoness Ji stood another cultivator. He was tall and had a Dao crown on his head. Lightning crackled on his body and he had a dignified expression. Taoist Zephyr Thunder. All 3 titular disciples were present. Look, Su Zimo is here. This person really doesn't want his life anymore. To think that he would dare to come for the appointment. There can't be anything going on between him and the pure maiden of the fiend sex, right? That's hard to say. Perhaps the #1 monster incarnate of history is a subject of the pure maiden of the fiend sex. Haha. Many cultivators in the crowd chuckled softly. Zimo, hurry and leave. Ignore me. Demoness Ji shouted with an anxious expression. Dao being Zephyr Thunder appeared from behind Demoness Ji and said indifferently, since he's already here, he won't be able to leave. Dao being Heavenly Dipper, who was initially looking up at the fairy stone statue, turned around slightly and looked at Su Zimo in midair. His eyes shone with starlight that was dazzling. I am Heavenly Dipper. Greetings, #1 perfected Lord. Dao being Heavenly Dipper smiled gently. In the Dao inheritance ground, demons could not use their methods. However, Su Zimo cultivated the mystic demon kings of the great wilderness all year round and his vision was strong. That was something that could not be changed. The starlight in Dao being Heavenly Dipper's eyes had no effect on him at all. Even so, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he felt immense pressure. He was almost certain that Dao being Heavenly Dipper knew visual techniques. This was a simple test. If he could not even withstand such a test, Dao being Heavenly Dipper would have attacked long ago and killed him here. On the gigantic green stone, Monk Formless raised his head slowly and looked towards Su Zimo. Patron Su, I've heard a lot about you. Nice to meet you, nice to meet you. Monk Formless' voice was calm and gentle, seemingly uncompetitive without any killing intent. However, every single word contained a unique rhythm that made one uneasy and their blood chi chaotic. It was extremely terrifying. Even if he could not circulate his blood chi, Monk Formless' test had almost no effect on him. Su Zimo landed on the empty ground expressionlessly. My horizons have truly been broadened, Su Zimo sneered. So the methods of titular disciples of the immortal and Buddhist sects are this despicable. Su Zimo was not the only one who thought that way. More than half of the cultivators present had the same thought. Each of the 3 titular disciples that stood out were renowned existences of the cultivation world. To think that they would resort to kidnapping the pure maiden of the fiend sex in order to kill Jining Zhenjuan. No matter how one looked at it, they were at a disadvantage. Dao being Zephyr Thunder and Dao being Heavenly Dipper were speechless. Monk Formless shook his head. Patron Su, you're wrong. Since ancient times, immortals and fiends have never coexisted. As someone of the righteous path, Patron Zephyr Thunder should slay demons and capture the demoness. How is that despicable? Slay demons and fiends? You lured me here to slay demons, right? Su Zimo asked with a mocking expression. Monk Formless said, Patron Su, you're an understanding person. If you're willing to put down your butcher's knife and convert to Buddhism, I can spare your life. Reverend, you have a glib tongue. I wonder how capable your subordinates are. Su Zimo sneered and the killing intent in his eyes intensified. Patron Su, feel free to try. Although Monk Formless seemed calm and aloof from worldly affairs, his words were tit for tat and he did not give in at all. Su Zimo withdrew Heaven Splitter from his storage bag and looked at Dao being Zephyr Thunder, saying in a deep voice, Release her and I'll accompany you to the end. Release her. Dao being Zephyr Thunder shook his head and said indifferently, You're not qualified to negotiate with us now. Dao being Heavenly Dipper stood where he was and Monk Formless sat on the green rock. They did not move and watched everything calmly. Zimo, don't bother about me. Hurry and leave. Demoness Ji pleaded bitterly with tears streaming down her face. How about this? I'll give you a chance. A hint of mockery flashed through Dao being Zephyr Thunder's eyes as he said with a fake smile, I'm standing right here. If you can save her from my hands, I'll consider you capable. For real? Su Zimo's gaze narrowed. There are many cultivators present. I naturally won't go back on my word. Dao being Zephyr Thunder said indifferently. All right. Su Zimo wielded Heaven Splitter and walked towards Dao being Zephyr Thunder slowly. A battle was about to break out. At that moment, the surrounding cultivators became nervous. Almost no one noticed that Dao being Heavenly Dipper and Monk Formless did not look nervous. Instead, there was a strange look in their eyes, as though they were anticipating something. Chapter 1003. The positions of the three titular disciples were extremely particular and formed a triangle. As Su Zimo headed towards Dao being Zephyr Thunder, he was inevitably surrounded by the three of them. As the distance between the two of them closed, the pressure on Su Zimo increased as well. Even back in Myriad Phenomenon City, he did not have such a feeling when he faced the Protoss and Rakshasa race. At that moment, his spirit perception was no longer of much use. That was because the three titular disciples were clearly trying to kill him. Even though his spirit perception warned him repeatedly, he had to barge in to save Demoness G. However, for some reason, Su Zimo still felt that something was amiss. Therefore, he walked extremely slowly with Heaven Splitter in his hands. He glared at Dao being Zephyr Thunder, but his mind was thinking about what went wrong. Su Zimo and Dao being Zephyr Thunder were getting closer. 30 feet. 20 feet. Before long, the two of them were less than 10 feet apart. At that distance, Su Zimo suddenly paused. His gaze landed on Demoness G's face. He finally understood what was wrong. It was not Dao being Zephyr Thunder, Dao being Heavenly Dipper or Monk Formless. It was Demoness G. Her peerlessly beautiful face, seductive figure, and even her coquettish voice were identical to Demoness G's. However, the person before him did not have Demoness G's charm that could bewitch all living beings. Demoness G was born with a seductive nature, and was not pretentious at all. Every single word, action, frown and smile was enough to charm all living beings. However, the seductiveness of the person before him was only on the surface and was far inferior compared to Demoness G. More importantly, the feeling of spiritual perception warning him right now was very familiar. This was the feeling every time an assassin of Hidden Death Sect was about to attack. The identity of the person before him was obvious. The assassin of Hidden Death Sect could change his appearance and disguise himself. However, he did not cultivate the secret skill of Pure Maiden Sect at the end of the day, and could not fully manifest the charm of the Pure Maiden of the Fiend sections. He could only imitate her appearance but not her spirit. Of course, even so, he was almost fooled. If the person before him was a titular disciple of Hidden Death Sect, it would be 4 titular disciples joining forces to kill him. Zimo, be careful. She's a fake. At this moment, a cry of surprise came from the crowd. Su Zimo's eyes lit up. There was no longer any doubt in his heart. Invicil, you're courting death. Su Zimo roared and slashed in reverse, releasing countercurrent saber intent as he slashed down viciously at Demoness G. A look of panic flashed through Demoness G's eyes. He didn't expect that this plan would fail at the final juncture. His true identity was a titular disciple of Hidden Death Sect. Before long, Dao being Hidden Death calmed down. No matter what, Su Zimo had already fallen into their encirclement. Although they were unable to assassinate him, Su Zimo would not be able to escape death. Dao being Hidden Death laughed coquettishly. Zimo, how can you bear to attack him? Whoosh! Dao being Hidden Death's figure flashed and swept to the side, disappearing in front of everyone. Hidden Death Sect specialized in concealment and assassination to begin with. Now that his identity was exposed, there was no way he would choose to fight Su Zimo head-on. His figure disappeared and no one knew where he went. That was also the most terrifying thing about Hidden Death Sect. It was not that he had already left without a trace. Instead, no one knew if he had left or if he was nearby. No one knew when he would attack either. This would cause immense mental pressure on cultivators, and they would have to be on high alert at all times. At the very least, they would have to divert half their attention to guard against the attacks of Hidden Death Sect cultivators. When they saw that, the crowd was in an uproar. The Pure Maiden of the Fiend sects earlier on was Dao being Hidden Death in disguise? That's way too real. It's exactly the same as the demonic cultivators of the Fiend sects. The legacy disciples of Hidden Death Sect are ever-changing and no one knows their true appearances. As a titular disciple of Hidden Death Sect, his methods are even more superb. In that case, the ones who surrounded Su Zimo should be 4 titular disciples. Seems like the number one monster incarnate of history is going to be buried here today. The crowd believed that no one could withstand the combined attacks of the four titular disciples. Even Dean, who was the most famous right now, could not do it. Changes happen instantly on the battlefield. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo attacked first and Dao being hidden death disappeared, leaving Dao being Zephyr Thunder and Su Zimo facing each other. Crackle! Unknowingly, a gigantic hammer that shone with green lightning and was surrounded by hurricanes appeared in Dao being Zephyr Thunder's palm. It was the connate dermic weapon, Zephyr Thunder Hammer. Against Su Zimo's incoming slash, Dao being Zephyr Thunder was fearless. He strode forward as well and swung the Zephyr Thunder Hammer, smashing it against the incoming saber. Any cultivator who used hammers was good at body tempering. It was the same for Dao being Zephyr Thunder. He did not believe that Su Zimo would be able to fight against him despite the difference of a major cultivation realm between them and his suppressed blood chi. Boom! Sparks flew when the saber and hammer collided. Dao being Zephyr Thunder shuddered and felt a terrifying power surge into his body through the Zephyr Thunder hammer, as though it wanted to sever his life force. Dermic power surged and his blood chi surged. Instantly, Dao being Zephyr Thunder suppressed the power. At the same time, Dao being Heavenly Dipper and Monk Formless attacks had already descended. I heard that you use sabers as well. I'd like to experience it. Dao being Heavenly Dipper wielded a saber filled with astral energy and slashed forward, scattering endless starlight as his saber intent descended. Su Zimo was fearless in terms of saber techniques. His gaze was cold as he slashed in reverse, slashing out layers of purgatory that engulfed the starlight in the skies and enveloped Dao being Heavenly Dipper. Dong! All of a sudden, a sound came from the void that contained a mysterious demonic power, causing Su Zimo's heart to skip a beat. He paused in his actions. The purgatory saber intent that he had just condensed dissipated instantly. Clang! The two sabers collided. Su Zimo lost his saber intent and was crushed by Dao being Heavenly Dipper's saber intent. With a dull grunt, he retreated and staggered. Su Zimo swept his gaze. Monk Formless strode over and glared at Su Zimo with a wooden fish in his left hand and a wooden mallet in his right. Just now, that strange and mysterious sound was the sound of Monk Formless knocking on the wooden fish. This was also a type of sound domain secret skill. However, sound domain secret skills were even more terrifying. They could be released repeatedly with the help of dermic weapons. Crackle! Lightning flashed before his eyes. Dao being Zephyr Thunder charged forward once more and swung his gigantic hammer, smashing it down towards Su Zimo's head. Su Zimo gripped Heaven Splitter tightly and released his purgatory saber intent once more. Blood chi filled the air and swept towards Dao being Zephyr Thunder. Dong! The sound of the wooden fish rang out. Su Zimo shuddered and his purgatory saber intent dissipated once more. Clang! At the same time, the Zephyr Hammer collided with Heaven Splitter with an ear-piercing sound. Affected by the sound of the wooden fish, Su Zimo's strength decreased sharply and Heaven Splitter was almost sent flying by Dao being Zephyr Thunder's hammer. Starlight scattered. Dao being Heavenly Dipper attacked once more. Monk Formless extended his wooden mallet and struck towards Su Zimo's head as well. The three titular disciples joined forces and did not give Su Zimo any chance to catch his breath. As though they had worked together for many years, they had a tacit understanding and released a torrential attack. Instantly, Su Zimo was in unprecedented danger. Chapter 1004. Against the combined forces of the three titular disciples, Su Zimo made use of his drunkenness to roar into the skies with a heroic aura. Gripping Heaven Splitter tightly, he slashed forward viciously. Not only did that slash produce countercurrent, it also contained the purgatory saber intent. The two saber intents showed signs of fusing, enveloping Dao being Zephyr Thunder, Dao being Heavenly Dipper and Monastery Formless. This person is truly ferocious. He can even retaliate against the combined forces of three titular disciples. The number one perfected Lord. Yi Tiancheng, perfected Lord Panglan and the others didn't die in vain. No wonder Diin chose this place as the battlefield. If this person could use his blood chi outside, what would it be like? The crowd lamented internally with shocked expressions. Stars encircling moon. Dao being Heavenly Dipper waved the saber in his hands, and a gigantic starry sky appeared above the four of them. Countless stars shone brightly, as though they were right in front of them, scattering endless starlight. The stars had already appeared. The moon that they were encircling was the slash of Dao being Heavenly Dipper. The saber drew a perfect arc in midair, crushing towards Su Zimo like a crescent moon descending. Starlight filled the skies and the crescent moon shone even brighter, emitting a cold killing intent. This level of saber intent was truly shocking. It was definitely not weaker than the sea-calming Manual and Shura saber. Tempest Hammer. Dao being Zephyr Thunder hollered like rumbling thunder. A series of hurricanes surged from his dermic hammer with a terrifying might and swept towards Su Zimo. The hurricanes howled, and before they even arrived, Su Zimo's cheeks were already hurting. That was not the true killing move. The body of the Tempest Hammer was already completely hidden in the hurricanes. Be it with the naked eye or spirit consciousness, there was no trace of the Tempest Hammer at all. However, Su Zimo knew that the connate dermic weapon was already smashing towards him. If he could not find the true body of the Tempest Hammer, his tendons and bones would be shattered no matter how strong his physique was. That was the strength of titular disciples. Su Zimo might not be able to win against any one of them. Right now, the combined attack of the two of them made him feel suffocated. Dong! At the same time, Temple Formless stared at Su Zimo with a faint smile and knocked the wooden fish in his hand again. The three titular disciples were all existences that stood at the top of the void reversion realm. Be it in terms of combat talent or combat experience, they were unmatched by others. Even though the three of them had never worked together before, their coordination was flawless. If he was affected by the sound of the wooden fish, the saber intent in Su Zimo's hand would disperse, and the stars surround the moon and the storm hammer would come crashing down. Su Zimo would be drowned by the two killer moves and die without a burial ground. Su Zimo had long been paying attention to Formless Temple's movements. The moment he saw the mallet in his hand strike down, he suddenly sucked in a breath. Kill! Su Zimo opened his mouth and let out a thunderous roar. Thunderclap kill! Although the sound domain secret skill was not augmented by any dermic weapon, it could reduce the impact of the sound of the wooden fish to a minimum. Su Zimo's saber intent was formed. Rumble! Boom! A gigantic purgatory descended and separated the stars from the crescent moon. In the Blood River, many skeletons stood up one after another and collided with the crescent moon. Crack! Crack! The two saber intents, stars surround the moon and purgatory, collided repeatedly with a terrifying might. At the same time, a hurricane descended. The Zephyr Thunder Hammer was hidden in the hurricane, but Su Zimo could not see it at all. Su Zimo made up his mind and closed his eyes, relying solely on his spirit perception to capture that fleeting flash of light. Time seemed to have slowed down. Everything around him seemed to have stopped. Although it seemed like 10,000 years had passed, in reality it was merely a flash. Without any warning, Su Zimo suddenly attacked with his saber. Against the current, he sliced through the layers of hurricanes and found the true body of the Zephyr Thunder Hammer, hidden within. Clang! The saber and hammer collided with a loud bang. Su Zimo and Dao being Zephyr Thunder shuddered. A look of disbelief flashed through Dao being Zephyr Thunder's eyes. To think that Jining Zhenjuan would still be able to defend against their attacks despite the combined attacks of the three titular disciples. The three of them did not know that it was precisely because of their encirclement and immense pressure that Su Zimo's potential was forced out. Right then something strange happened. The ground beneath Su Zimo's feet suddenly split open and a skinny and pale palm reached out without warning, grabbing his ankle. A bone-piercing chill followed his ankle and invaded his body. It wanted to freeze his meridians, blood, and organs. Su Zimo was alarmed. There's someone else. Apart from Dao being Heavenly Dipper, Dao being Zephyr Thunder, Monk Formless and Dao being Hidden Death, there was another person hidden underground who escaped his senses. For Su Zimo, the fact that this person attacked at this moment was fatal. This cold and gloomy chi invaded his body, causing his strength to dissipate. His Purgatory Saber Intent and Countercurrent Saber Intent swayed and showed signs of collapsing. Boom! The ground exploded and a pitch-black figure burrowed out from the ground. He wielded a sinister bone spear and stabbed it towards the back of Su Zimo's head. Ah! The crowd was in an uproar when they saw that. That person's timing was perfect. Su Zimo's entire focus and strength was on defending against the frontal attacks of Dao being Zephyr Thunder, Dao being Heavenly Dipper and Monk Formless. He did not have the strength to defend against the killing move behind him. Furthermore, there was no warning this time round and it was almost a sure kill attack. It's him, the titular disciple of Malevolent Earth Sect. Another titular disciple has appeared, and he's still trying to kill Su Zimo. Some cultivators recognized the identity of this black-robed cultivator and let out a series of shouts. Right then, the void beside Su Zimo distorted and a figure appeared strangely like a ghost. Wielding a sword, the figure stabbed towards Su Zimo's temple. Dao being Hidden Death had attacked as well. Instantly, all the cultivators present were speechless as they widened their eyes in disbelief. Their eyes were filled with shock. In order to kill Jining Jinjuan, 5 titular disciples of the cultivation world were mobilized. Throughout history, no one had been able to enjoy such treatment. Sigh, I wonder if this is his fortune or sorrow. Some cultivators sighed internally with emotional expressions. Su Zimo was already dead for sure if 5 titular disciples attacked at the same time. At this moment, many cultivators felt a trace of pity and sympathy in their hearts as they watched this scene. This was the injustice of fate. Without a super sect as a backer, no matter how monstrous one was, they would still be killed and unable to escape death. I believe that even if this person dies prematurely, he won't be forgotten quickly like the other paragons. A cultivator said softly, for 5 titular disciples to join forces to kill him, such a monster incarnate is enough to be recorded in the annals of history. Chapter 1005. No one could understand the feeling of being surrounded by 5 titular disciples. Suffocation, despair and omnipresent oppression. Su Zimo could sense that he was about to be torn into pieces and destroyed in body and spirit the next moment. In fact, he could even smell the aura of death and knew that he was falling into an endless abyss. At that moment, all his trump cards were useless. Even if he released the creation Qinglian and the candlelight sword formation, he would not be able to resolve this situation of certain death. Starlight scattered and pierced through the purgatory. The crescent saber sliced the entire purgatory into 2 and landed heavily on Heaven's Splitter. A hurricane howled and the Zephyr Thunder hammer exploded once more, smashing against Heaven Splitter's blade. The saber and hammer descended at the same time and a terrifying power burst forth. Su Zimo's palm was torn apart instantly and blood gushed out. He could not hold on to Heaven Splitter and it flew out of his hands. Up till this point of his cultivation, this was the first time his weapon was knocked out of his hands. However, this was only the beginning. Dao being Malevolent Earth's Bone Spear and Dao being Hidden Death's Sword had already arrived. No matter how strong Su Zimo's physique was, even if he could use his blood qi, he would not be able to defend against the sharpness of Khanate Dao being dermic weapons. Facing him, Dao being Heavenly Dipper smiled faintly and raised his chin slightly, looking down with a hint of pity in his eyes. Dao being Zephyr Thunder was expressionless and his gaze was already fixed on the storage bag on Su Zimo's waist. He was determined to obtain the Purple Thunder manual. Monk Formless had a compassionate expression and pressed his palms together, as though he was prepared to snatch Su Zimo's creation Qinglian after his death and expiate him. At the brink of death, Su Zimo calmed down swiftly. Up till this point of the battle, his left hand had been empty and hovering near his waist. But now, his left hand suddenly gripped an inconspicuous jade pendant on his waist and crushed it. Piak! The jade pendant shattered and burst forth with a bedazzling brilliance. Instantly, Su Zimo was enveloped by it, forming a gigantic barrier of light. Boom! Dao being Malevolent Earth's Bone Spear and Dao being Hidden Death's Sword collided with the light barrier almost at the same time and let out a loud bang. Su Zimo's figure was instantly sent flying and fell to the side. Cracks began to appear on the light barrier as the attacks from the 2 titular disciples continued to attack. It soon dissipated. Taoist Heavenly Dipper and the others narrowed their eyes. A protective magic artifact? As titular disciples, they immediately recognized the origin of this light shield. Protection dermic artifacts like accessories were the most precious and rare. They were prepared by the various super sects or conjoint body mighty figures for the people closest to them. This thing seemed unremarkable, but it could save a life at a critical moment. This protective magic tool was given to him by Shangguanzi of the Chiguramon. Su Zimo felt a lingering fear in his heart. If not for this magical item just now, he would have perished. Even if he had the red-haired Een spirit, dragonization and many other techniques, it would be useless. Of course, even so, Su Zimo was still injured. This protective dermic weapon could defend against the full-powered attack of a void reversion. Although it defended against the explosive attacks of Dao being malevolent earth and Dao being hidden death, the powers of Dao being Zephyr Thunder and Dao being Heavenly Dipper had already broken through his defenses and surged into his body before he summoned his protective dermic weapon. Exclamation point. Su Zimo knelt on the ground with a pale face and spat out a mouthful of blood. Zimo, how are you? Right then, a fragrance wafted over and a pink figure appeared beside him. Su Zimo glanced sideways. The girl before him was naturally charming and pursed her lips tightly. Tears welled in her eyes and they were filled with worry and heartache. Demoness G. The girl before him was the true Demoness G. Right before the two of them exchanged blows, a voice sounded from the crowd, reminding him to be careful. Su Zimo guessed that Demoness G was truly here. Although he had fallen into the trap of the 5 titular disciples, at the very least, Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the others did not lie to him. Fufu ha ha ha. Su Zimo's lips were stained with blood as he looked at the girl beside him. Suddenly, he could not help but laugh, unable to conceal the joy in his eyes. What are you laughing at? Su Zimo was already surrounded by the 5 titular disciples and could not escape. Demoness G was so worried that she was about to cry. You fool! She thumped Su Zimo's shoulder gently and said with a sobbing voice, You were deceived. You shouldn't have come. Apart from worry, Demoness G was also filled with endless self-blame. If she had appeared earlier and stopped Su Zimo before Su Zimo arrived, the current situation would not have happened. That's not a bad thing, Su Zimo chuckled. At the very least you're safe. Demoness G was stunned. The tears in her eyes could no longer be controlled. Like a string of sparkling and translucent jade beads, they slid down and wetted her clothes. She was a little dazed as she looked at Su Zimo's smiling face. Even though the person before her was deceived by the 5 titular disciples and was in a desperate situation, the reason why he could still smile so happily was because she was safe. However, the price was way too great. A gentle look flashed through Demoness G's eyes as she said softly, Those are the most touching words of love I've ever heard. Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the other 4 had relaxed expressions and were in no hurry. Even if Su Zimo managed to escape with the help of a protection dermic weapon, he was already injured. Furthermore, there was no way Su Zimo could escape from the 5 of them. Dao being Hidden Death swayed and disappeared once more. Dao being Malevolent Earth was expressionless and cold as he looked at Demoness G and said slowly, As someone of the fiend sex, I'll kindly remind you to stay away from him. Otherwise, if the battle starts and you die because of this, there won't be anyone left in Pure Maiden sect. Su Zimo stood up slowly and looked at Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the others with a lightning gaze. Heaven Splitter had already fallen to the side. Su Zimo's glabella shone and he summoned Creation Qinglian. Monk Formless eyes rippled as he looked at the flawless green lotus platform that spun slowly in midair. Supporting Creation Qinglian with his left hand, Su Zimo sent a voice transmission to Demoness G, Leave this place first. The 5 of them won't be able to trap me. If this was Tianhuang mainland, the 5 titular disciples would indeed not be able to trap him. As long as he released Blood Escape, even the Dharma Dao Jun might not be able to catch up to him. However, this was the Dao inheritance ground and his Blood Escape could not be used either. The reason why he said that was because he wanted Demoness G to leave and escape from the danger here. Really? Demoness G's heart skipped a beat and a glimmer of hope shone in her eyes. She knew what Su Zimo was capable of. It was not impossible for him to escape from the 5 titular disciples. Hurry and leave. Su Zimo sent a voice transmission, As long as you leave, I'll be able to fight with my full strength and retreat at any time. If I want to leave, no one can stop me. Alright. Demoness G believed him and grit her teeth. Wiping away the tears on her face, she turned to leave. Chapter 1006. Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the other 5 titular disciples did not stop her as they watched her leave. It was better to avoid trouble. Furthermore, Demoness G was from the Fiend sections. Right now, 2 of the 5 titular disciples were from the Fiend sects. There was no need to make enemies. They only had a single goal, to kill Su Zimo and split his treasures. Alright. Dao being Heavenly Dipper clapped and smiled. The beauty is gone. You can be on your way as well. Haha. Su Zimo grinned with a ferocious glint in his eyes as he said coldly, I'm not a match for the 5 of you alone. However, it's not impossible for me to drag one of you down with me before I die. Fu. Dao being Heavenly Dipper shook his head and chuckled. Su Zimo, you're still too naive. If you advance to the Void Reversion realm, you might have the right to say that. But now you're still far from it. Don't waste your breath on him. Dao being Malevolent Earth said. The commotion here is so huge that Dean might be rushing over. At that time we'll have to split a portion of his treasures. At the mention of Dean, a hint of fear flashed through the eyes of the 4 of them. Compared to the 4 of them, Dean could only be considered as a rising star. However, in recent years, he was already showing signs of surpassing his predecessors. At the very least, none of the 4 of them were willing to be enemies with Dean. The 4 of them split up and walked towards Su Zimo, gradually surrounding him. Once the 4 of them surrounded him, Su Zimo would be attacked from the front and back. At that thought, Su Zimo's figure flashed and he took the initiative to attack, charging towards Dao being Malevolent Earth who was at the side. Oh! Dao being Malevolent Earth's gaze turned cold as he sneered. You're actually attacking me first. Do you think I'm the easiest to provoke? Swoosh! 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 Dao being Malevolent Earth danced with his bone spear, creating spear shadows in midair that were pitch black with a malevolent aura. One after another, menacing ghost faces appeared in midair and devoured Su Zimo. Dong! Monk Formless lowered his gaze and knocked on the wooden fish once more. Buzz! At the same time, Su Zimo also chanted Sanskrit to dissolve the wooden fish's dermic voice. At the same time, his right hand formed a seal and burst forth with the demon vanquishing seal. Rumble! A gigantic golden palm appeared in the firmaments and crushed down towards Dao being Malevolent Earth. Demon subduing seal was the most effective against people from the evil sects. When Monk Formless saw that the sound of the wooden fish was useless against Su Zimo, he swung the wooden mallet in his hand. It rapidly expanded and smashed down on Su Zimo's head. Severe warning. Monk Formless chided softly. Just now, the Sky Splitter had been sent flying and lost its connection to it. Su Zimo did not dare to release Qinglian, the good fortune creation, and held it in his palm the entire time. Seeing the wooden mallet coming down on him, Su Zimo lifted the creation Qinglian with a flip of his hand. Rays of resplendent light burst forth and collided with the mallet. Whoosh! Dao being Heavenly Dipper arrived beside Su Zimo and flipped his wrist, slashing down with his saber. Accompanied by endless starlight, astral chi filled the air in a terrifying manner. Woo-woo! A hurricane howled. Dao being Zephyr Thunder swung his Zephyr Thunder hammer, creating layers of hurricanes that smashed down viciously on Su Zimo's head. Su Zimo had just released the fiend subduing seal with his right hand when he slapped his storage bag and took out a dark gray mountain, throwing it behind him. The ancient unique treasure, Mystic Magnet Mountain. The Mystic Magnet Mountain expanded with the wind and blocked Su Zimo's back, releasing a powerful suction force. The suction force did not affect Dao being Malevolent Earth's bone spear and monastery formless wooden fish at all. However, it had a huge impact on Dao being Heavenly Dipper's saber, and Dao being Zephyr Thunder's Zephyr Thunder hammer. That was also the reason why Su Zimo attacked Dao being Malevolent Earth and monastery formless right away. If he wanted to survive in this situation, he had to expand his advantage to the maximum without any mistakes. Swoosh! The suction force of the Mystic Magnet Mountain was extremely strong. Dao being Heavenly Dipper frowned. Although he gripped the saber in his hands tightly with immense strength, the saber still deviated from its original trajectory uncontrollably. It was difficult for the saber intent to condense and it dissipated before long. On the other side, Dao being Zephyr Thunder's situation was similar. His charge was extremely ferocious. In the end, he was sucked in by the Mystic Magnet Mountain and could not stop in time. The Zephyr Thunder hammer carried his body and slammed heavily onto the mystic magnet mountain. Boom! Dao being Zephyr Thunder shuddered and his mind buzzed. Even his teeth loosened. Although he was not injured, it was extremely uncomfortable. Dao being Heavenly Dipper frowned. He controlled his saber and tried his best to prevent it from being sucked in by the mystic magnet mountain. However, if this stalemate continued, he would not be able to threaten Su Zimo at all. That was the power of ancient unique treasures. At critical moments they could play an extremely miraculous role. At the same time, the head-on clash had already erupted. In midair, the golden palm collided with Dao being Malevolent Earth's bone spear, and a gigantic hole was created. The palm was also corroded by the Malevolent Earth Qi. However, this battle took a toll on Dao being Malevolent Earth as well. On the other side, the creation Qinglian collided with the wooden mallet. The Qinglian shone with an incomparable glow, as though she was the most beautiful treasure in the world. With a dull grunt, Monk Formless retreated. Although he was at the Void Reversion realm, he was still disadvantaged in melee combat against Su Zimo, who was wielding the creation Qinglian. In a flash, Dao being Malevolent Earth circled behind Su Zimo, and suddenly took out a pitch-black gourd from his storage bag. Removing the wooden cork, he tossed the black gourd into the skies. Swoosh! Endless blood splattered down from the black gourd with a foul stench. The bloodstains were already black, as though countless vengeful spirits were howling tragically. The black blood splattered onto the mystic magnet mountain. Buzz! Buzz! Black smoke billowed from the mystic magnet mountain, as though it was corroded by something. The light of the mystic magnet mountain dimmed rapidly. Malevolent Earth blood? Su Zimo's gaze turned cold. Back at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, he had browsed through countless ancient books. Among them, there were records regarding the Malevolent Earth blood. The Malevolent Earth blood required the blood of young girls to be refined and fused with Malevolent Earth Qi. Finally, the young girls were killed and their souls were fused into it. It was extremely savage. The more souls there were, the stronger the Malevolent Earth blood would be. The Malevolent Earth blood specialized in destroying dermic weapons and weapons. Legend has it that there was once a great fiend of the fiend sex who refined the Malevolent Earth blood. A single drop was enough to destroy a dermic treasure. Although the Malevolent Earth blood before him did not reach that level of power, it tainted the mystic magnet mountain with endless filthy souls, and caused it to temporarily lose its power of magnetism. At least you're knowledgeable. Dao being Malevolent Earth harumphed coldly. I was prepared to deal with you. His Malevolent Earth blood was specially made to counter Su Zimo's mystic magnet mountain. With the mystic magnet mountain destroyed, Dao being Heavenly Dipper and Dao being Zephyr Thunder relaxed instantly and attacked at the same time, charging towards Su Zimo. At the same time, Formless Monastery and Dao being Malevolent Earth attacked once more. Changes happen instantly on the battlefield. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo was already surrounded by 4 titular disciples and was in danger. In an invisible corner, an extremely terrifying assassin was hiding, retracting his killing intent and waiting for an opportunity to strike. It was fine if he did not attack. If he attacked, it would be a sure kill strike. Chapter 1007. The saber beam descended. As Dao being Heavenly Dipper slashed out with his terrifying saber intent, he clenched his left hand into a fist and released his sex secret skill, hollering softly, "Heavenly Dipper Fist." Suddenly, stars appeared in the firmaments and spun slowly, scattering down streams of starlight that gathered on Dao being Heavenly Dipper's fist. Dao being Heavenly Dipper's fist seemed to have transformed into a gigantic star. The saber intent and secret skill descended at the same time. Dao being Heavenly Dipper did not want to delay any longer, and had already used his full strength. Get lost. Su Zimo's eyes shone with a cold glint as he pinched his sword fingers and slashed in the direction of Dao being Heavenly Dipper. Qi! A dazzling sword light burst forth, creating a vast expanse of whiteness. The heavens released killing intent, shifting the stars. The power released by this burst of sword Qi caused the constellations in the sky to become chaotic. They collided and fell one after another. Heavenly Dipper Fist was broken by the heaven-slaying sword art halfway. Dao being Heavenly Dipper's expression changed. As a titular disciple, he could naturally sense the power of the sword art. The saber intent collided with it. It was silent. His saber intent was sliced into two by the white sword chi and dissipated instantly. Dao being Heavenly Dipper released his blood chi and dermic powers surged within his body. Wielding his saber with both hands, he slashed towards the incoming sword chi. Clang! The sword chi collided with the saber and the sound of metal clashing could be heard. The sword chi finally dissipated. As for Dao being Heavenly Dipper, he took half a step back with a hint of fear in his eyes. That sword chi was way too terrifying. It broke through his saber intent and secret skill and only dissipated after clashing head-on with his blood chi and body. If Su Zimo were to advance to the Void Reversion realm, the power of that sword chi would increase several times. At that time, who would dare to face it head-on? Just as Su Zimo released the heaven-slaying sword art and forced Dao being Heavenly Dipper back, the hammer shadow hovered in the air and held over. Lightning flashed in Su Zimo's eyes as he changed hand seals repeatedly. Suddenly thunder rumbled in the skies. Dark clouds pressed over like lead. Purple thunderstorm. Su Zimo pointed in the direction of Taoist Zephyr thunder. Under the dark clouds, streaks of blazing lightning poured down, connecting the heavens and the earth. They constantly intertwined, forming a terrifying purple lightning storm. The storm engulfed Dao being Zephyr Thunder instantly. This is the supreme cultivation technique of my Zephyr Thunder Palace. Dao being Zephyr Thunder was enraged as streaks of green lightning burst forth from his body. He danced with his Zephyr Thunder hammer and roared in the purple thunderstorm. A gust of wind blew from behind. A dense cluster of flying swords the size of steel needles appeared in Su Zimo's right eye. He turned around and looked at Dao being Malevolent Earth. Whoosh! Whoosh! 36 flying swords tore through the air, leaving behind streaks of sword chi in the air. They condensed into the candlelight sword formation and collided viciously with the incoming bone spear. Boom! With a loud bang, the sword formation collapsed, and the 36 flying swords returned to Su Zimo's right eye. Monk Wuxiang's wooden mallet descended. Su Zimo lifted Creation Qinglian and welcomed it. At the same time, a phantom-like figure appeared behind him and stabbed towards the back of his head. Dao being Hidden Death had attacked. Su Zimo supported the lotus with his left hand and defended against Monk Wuxiang. At the same time, he twisted his body and reached out with his right hand to grab the sword behind him. Boom! Creation Qinglian blocked the wooden mallet once more. However, Su Zimo's right hand grabbed the sword in his palm. You must have a death wish. Dao being Hidden Death sword spun and sliced open the flesh on Su Zimo's right hand instantly. However, when the sword sliced through flesh and reached the bone, it could no longer move. Divine Phoenix Bone. Even the Dharma treasure of a conjoint body mighty figure might not be able to damage it at all, let alone Khanate Dao being dermic weapons. Su Zimo's right hand curled, trembled and pulled. The killing move of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness burst forth suddenly. Dao being Hidden Death could not hold onto his sword, and it was grabbed by Su Zimo's right hand. The crowd was in an uproar when they saw that. Against the ferocious attacks of the 5 titular disciples, Su Zimo could still retaliate and snatch Dao being Hidden Death's weapon bare-handed. Malevolent Earth Finger. Dao being Malevolent Earth released his sex secret skill, and a sinister finger formed from black chi. Malevolent chi coiled around it, and it charged towards Su Zimo with a sinister aura. A ferocious glint flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. He did not dodge the malevolent earth finger and used his sword as a saber, slashing towards Dao being Hidden Death who had yet to retreat. This was a gamble with his life. He had to kill Dao being Hidden Death even if he had to be struck by the malevolent earth finger. Exclamation point. A flash of blood appeared. Dao being Hidden Death shrieked and retreated. A wound appeared on his body as he disappeared into the void once more. A look of pity flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. At the end of the day, he was still lacking. Dao being Hidden Death was a titular disciple after all. Although his combat strength was inferior to other titular disciples, his escape methods were not inferior at all. At the same time, the malevolent earth finger struck Su Zimo's chest heavily and sent him flying instantly. The 5 titular disciples did not give Su Zimo any chance to catch his breath. If it was any other time, he would be able to gain the upper hand with every single one of his trump cards. In fact, he could even find an opportunity to kill his opponent. But now, He could only barely defend against the dermic arts, sword arts and visual techniques. In the end, he was still injured by the malevolent earth finger. Although he was wearing a perfect-grade dermic weapon inner armor, it could not completely isolate the power of the malevolent earth finger. Much of the remaining power surged into his body, and his organs were already shaken violently. Exclamation point. Su Zimo wielded the sword he snatched from Dao Being Hidden Death in his right hand and leaned against the ground. He spat out another mouthful of blood and his face turned paler. In just 2 rounds all of his trump cards had been used up. As for the 5 titular disciples, they were almost unaffected. Dao Being Hidden Death was the only one who was injured by his sword, and it was not his vitals. Even if Dao Being Hidden Death did not attack, as long as Dao Being Heavenly Dipper and the other 4 titular disciples unleashed another wave of attacks, Su Zimo would definitely die. Su Zimo, you've lost. Dao Being Heavenly Dipper looked at Su Zimo without any pity. Dao Being Zephyr Thunder said indifferently, "It's a worthy death for you to be killed by the combined forces of the 5 of us titular disciples." Sigh. Monk Formless sighed gently. "Patron Su, I gave you a chance. Unfortunately, you have no choice." The 4 titular disciples seemed to be lamenting. However, there was a sense of superiority in their words. Su Zimo's black hair fluttered and his face was pale. The blood at the corner of his lips had yet to dry and he looked like he was in an extremely bad state. However, his eyes were still bright and clear. "Fufu." Su Zimo laughed. "Are you guys very smug? Do you guys feel proud that 5 titular disciples joined forces to kill Jining Jinjuan in the Dao inheritance ground?" The smile on Dao Being Heavenly Dipper's face gradually disappeared. The expressions of Dao Being Zephyr Thunder and the others darkened as well. Su Zimo pointed at Monk Formless' group of 4 and laughed maniacally. "Are the 5 of you worthy of being titular disciples? What a joke. How ridiculous. Although you guys have the upper hand now, your hearts are filled with fear. You're afraid that I'll escape and grow. As long as I'm alive, I'll forever be a nightmare for the 5 of you." Su Zimo's words struck at their hearts and were even more terrifying than divine weapons. The Dao hearts of the 5 of them wavered. "Kill him." Dao Being Malevolent Earth could no longer hold it in and leaped up, charging towards Su Zimo. Chapter 1008. Right then, an unusual commotion broke out in the crowd. "Die Fiend!" A cultivator suddenly stood out and charged towards Dao Being Malevolent Earth. "Kill! Kill the fiend!" One figure after another stood out. All of them were void reversions and charged towards Dao Being Malevolent Earth as though they had lost their minds. Su Zimo was slightly stunned. Were these cultivators fighting for justice or did they have a personal feud with Dao Being Malevolent Earth? A void reversion rushed forward and his blood chi burst forth. With a flick of his wrist, his sword drew more than 10 sword flowers in midair and floated towards Dao Being Malevolent Earth. Poof! Dao Being Malevolent Earth raised his bone spear and stabbed in reverse, piercing through the layers of sword flowers with ease and creating a gigantic bloody hole in the person's body. A malevolent aura surged within the bone spear and surged into the spirit platform. This person's essence spirit was destroyed back then. Another 2 void reversions charged forward. Dao Being Malevolent Earth waved his bone spear and pierced the bodies of the 2 of them with just 2 moves. "A bunch of ants." Dao Being Malevolent Earth sneered. Poof! 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 Dao Being Malevolent Earth was in a killing frenzy as he charged into the crowd and stabbed more than 10 cultivators to death. More than 10 corpses hung on the bone spear, dripping with blood in a shocking manner. Although Su Zimo seemed to be able to exchange blows with the 5 titular disciples, in reality, most void reversions could not even last 3 moves against the titular disciples. If these cultivators charged forward, they would be courting death. Many more cultivators charged forward as though they had lost their minds. Not only did they charge towards Dao Being Malevolent Earth, there were also people who attacked Dao Being Heavenly Dipper, Dao Being Zephyr Thunder and Monastery Formless. To be able to become a titular disciple, none of them were good people. The 3 of them attacked decisively and in a few moves, corpses were piled beneath their feet. The surrounding crowd was in chaos and countless cultivators were retreating, as though they were avoiding something. Su Zimo focused his gaze and finally noticed something. A pink figure was moving through the crowd, releasing the bewitchment technique of pure maiden sect towards the void reversions present. Cultivators with weak minds and unstable Dao hearts would be bewitched before long and charge towards Dao being malevolent earth and the others as though they had gone mad. Demoness Ji. She hadn't left at all. Kill. She murmured repeatedly. Go up and kill those titular disciples. Your names will spread throughout the world and you will obtain countless treasures. You will replace him and become the new titular disciples. Demoness Ji's gaze, appearance, voice and figure exuded seduction from head to toe, causing one to fall head over heels and be subconsciously controlled by her. However, it did not take long for the remaining cultivators to react. When they saw Demoness Ji walking over, they hurriedly retreated, afraid that they would not be able to avoid her. In the end, Demoness Ji was the only one left standing on the spot with no one else around her. Forget it. Su Zimo smiled and said, don't involve other people. They will only die if they come here. She looked at Su Zimo and shook her head. I don't care. Their lives and deaths have nothing to do with me. I only want you to live. When they heard that, countless cultivators hid in the distance and cursed. As expected of the demoness of the fiend sex, she's truly inhumane. If there's a chance, I'll definitely capture her alive and toy with her properly so that she can experience my might. Those cultivators only dared to curse from afar, and did not dare to advance. Coupled with his pure heart and the fact that he had a super sect like Dipankara Monastery as his backing with endless resources, it was not surprising that he could advance to the void reversion realm after 100 years. To think that apart from Demoness Ji, Mingzhan had entered the Dao inheritance ground as well. A warm current flowed through Su Zimo's heart. He was not alone. You're the little monk who joined Dipankara Monastery 100 years ago? Monk Formless frowned slightly and asked. My current Dao title is Dipankara. Mingzhan replied with a calm expression. The meaning of the Dao title Dipankara was that Mingzhan had already become the titular disciple of Dipankara Monastery. Dao being malevolent earth frowned. Including Demoness Ji and Mingzhan, it meant that there were two titular disciples on Su Zimo's side. Initially, the situation that could have been resolved easily had become slightly troublesome. Su Zimo is truly not fated to die. To think that two titular disciples would help him. It's useless. The two of them have just entered the void reversion realm. Although they're also titular disciples, they haven't condensed their Dao hearts. In terms of combat strength, they're no match for Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the others. At most, they can delay it for a moment. The outcome won't change. Some cultivators had good eyesight. Their analysis was clear and logical. Chapter 1009. Su Zimo straightened his body slowly and the flames of battle burned in his eyes once more. At that moment, even if Demoness Ji and Mingzhan were to leave, they would definitely not leave. Right now, there was only a single way to break out of this situation. Kill their way out. Sensing Su Zimo's fighting spirit, Dao being Heavenly Dipper smiled gently and said leisurely, interesting. To think that you haven't given up yet. Leave this little monk to me, Monk Formless said indifferently. I can discuss Buddhism with him as well. Dao being Malevolent Earth said coldly. I'll deal with Demoness Ji. The three of you kill Su Zimo as soon as possible. Don't forget to give me a share of the treasures. A long sword appeared in Demoness Ji's hands. Suddenly, a green lamp flew out from Mingzhan's glabella. A tiny flame burned on the green lamp. It was the size of a pinky and flickered, as though it could be extinguished at any moment. A hint of fear flashed through the depths of Monk Formless' eyes when he saw the green lamp. Dong! Monk Formless was the first to strike the wooden fish. Mingzhan's expression was unchanged as he chanted Sanskrit. He had once cultivated the Daming True Sutra at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, and the sound of the wooden fish had an extremely low impact on him. Formless Dermic Seal. Monk Formless conjured hand seals with both hands and released a gigantic dermic seal that smashed towards Mingzhan. Su Zimo had seen the void reversion monks of Formless Monastery release this dermic seal before. However, its power was worlds apart from the one released by Monk Formless. Mingzhan was fearless as he wielded the green lamp and conjured hand seals, exhaling gently at the flames on the green lamp. Swoosh! The flames on the green lamp intensified and burned towards the formless dermic seal, turning it into nothingness before long. Although Mingzhan was only at the early stage void reversion realm, he was not disadvantaged against Monk Formless. On the other side, Demoness Ji and Dao being Malevolent Earth were already fighting as well. Dao being Malevolent Earth was stronger. However, Demoness Ji relied on the heavenly fiend dance that she learned from Fairy Ling Long in the Human Emperor's Palace, and her movement technique was agile. Dao being Malevolent Earth could not hurt her at all. Back in Myriad Phenomenon City, even the Rakshasa race found the heavenly fiend dance technique troublesome. The battle between the titular disciples of the two fiend sects would probably be difficult to determine in a short period of time. Su Zimo would face the two titular disciples, Taoist Zephyr Thunder and Taoist Heavenly Dipper alone, as well as Taoist Hidden Death who was hiding in the dark. Let's fight! Su Zimo's eyes shone brightly as he strode towards the opposite side. Boom! 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 Su Zimo held Creation Qinglian in his left hand and clashed with Dao being Heavenly Dipper's saber, and Dao being Zephyr Thunder's Zephyr Thunder hammer, without being disadvantaged. He held the sword that he had snatched from Taoist Hidden Death in his right hand, and used it as a saber, condensing layers of saber intent. Countercurrent, whirlpool, stormy waves and ripple. Ghost cry, blood flow, purgatory, white bones, demon shadow. The sea calming saber and the Shura saber kept colliding with each other. In the end they were about to merge. The saber intent turned thicker, more condensed and ferocious. Against the two titular disciples, Su Zimo released all his potential and channeled the scarlet flame revolving lamp to protect his body. He was like an immortal king that had descended and became braver as he fought. However, Dao being Heavenly Dipper and Dao being Zephyr Thunder were secretly shocked. The two of them combined were definitely stronger than Su Zimo. Furthermore, Su Zimo was already injured. However, Su Zimo's saber intent was getting thicker and thicker. His intent was getting more terrifying and condensed. There was a high chance that he would break through in the battle. As for their attacks, even if they passed through Su Zimo's saber intent, they would be neutralized by the blazing flame revolving lamp around him. Dao being Hidden Death did not appear the entire time. There were two possibilities. Firstly, he had already left. That was extremely unlikely because he was injured by Su Zimo. Given the vengeful nature of Hidden Death sex assassins, there was no way they would leave. Secondly, Dao being Hidden Death did not have the chance to attack. The current situation gave the surrounding cultivators the illusion that Su Zimo was suppressing the two titular disciples. A hint of impatience finally appeared in the eyes of Dao being Heavenly Dipper and Dao being Zephyr Thunder. They no longer wanted to drag this on. Su Zimo, let me tell you the biggest difference between the nascent soul realm and the void reversion realm. Dao being Heavenly Dipper said slowly and his glabella shone. A terrifying spirit consciousness burst forth and condensed into a star in midair that charged towards Su Zimo. Essence Spirit Secret Skill. At this point of the battle, Dao being Heavenly Dipper was finally forced to release his Essence Spirit Secret Skill. Dao being Zephyr Thunder followed suit without hesitation. Spirit Shaker Art. A thick spirit consciousness condensed into a hammer of spirit consciousness in midair and smashed towards Su Zimo. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. Essence Spirit Secret Skills were not like a clash of dermic arts or saber intents. Be it a clash of dermic arts or a clash of saber intents, even if power surged into his body, he could rely on his powerful physique and terrifying regeneration capabilities to continue holding on. However, an Essence Spirit battle was different. If he was careless, his Essence Spirit would be destroyed. Su Zimo activated the Mingwang prayer beads right away. Buzz! The Mingwang prayer bead shone brightly and emitted an invisible barrier of light. Golden runes shone on it and it was filled with a Buddhist light that was sacred and flawless. The star crushed over and collided with the barrier of light. There was a brief pause. The barrier of light shattered. The star turned into nothingness as well. Swoosh! The hammer of spirit consciousness pounced forward and charged into Su Zimo's consciousness, smashing down viciously towards his essence spirit. The 45 green lotus seeds of good fortune turned into rays of green light, constantly colliding with the hammer of divine consciousness. Cling! Clang! There was a crisp sound. The glow on the 45 green lotus seeds of good fortune had already dissipated. Only then did the hammer of consciousness gradually dissipate. Su Zimo heaved a sigh of relief. Although the entire process seemed short, it was extremely dangerous. If he could not defend against the two essence spirit secret skills, he would be killed directly. No matter how strong his physique was, it would be useless. Right then, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. Not good. Su Zimo's expression changed in shock. At the final moment, he had neglected someone. Dao being hit in death. A spirit consciousness dagger barged into his consciousness and stabbed towards Su Zimo's essence spirit fiercely. At that moment, the 45 creation Qinglian seeds had just collided with the hammer of spirit consciousness. Without the glow, they could not defend against the spirit consciousness dagger at all. It was a fatal killing move. Against the spirit consciousness dagger, Su Zimo's black-haired essence spirit was like a 3-year-old child. It could not resist at all. In a flash, the scarlet-haired Yin spirit rushed out from a corner of his consciousness. Although the Dao inheritance ground restricted bloodlines and the spirit consciousnesses of demons, however, the actions of the scarlet-haired Yin spirit in his consciousness would not be sensed. The scarlet-haired Yin spirit collided with the black-haired essence spirit, and the two essence spirits fused completely, transforming into an existence that was half human and half dragon with scales all over its body. The spirit consciousness dagger struck the brand new essence spirit. Bang! As the consciousness dagger dissipated, a large patch of dragon scales was scraped off from this brand new essence spirit's body. The tremendous force directly separated the two essence spirits. No matter how strong the two essence spirits were, there was only a layer of dragon scales as a barrier. It could not defend against the essence spirit secret skills of titular disciples. Exclamation point. Su Zimo spat out a mouthful of blood. Although the two essence spirits did not die, they were still severely injured and withered rapidly. Chapter 10:10. In the end, he was still defeated. A sense of indignance surged in Su Zimo's heart. In reality, he did not know that Dao being Heavenly Dipper and Dao being Zephyr Thunder were even more shocked at that moment. The three of them titular disciples joined forces and released their essence spirit secret skills, but they could not kill a single Jining Jinjuan. It was truly unimaginable how far this person would grow in the future, if he was allowed to cultivate. The battle between the other two sides was gradually becoming clearer as well. Between Demoness Ji and Dao being Malevolent Earth, neither could do anything to the other. Demoness Ji's methods could not pose a threat to Dao being Malevolent Earth. However, with her Heavenly Fiend dance, Dao being Malevolent Earth could not hurt her at all. Even if the two of them fought for a day and night, they would most likely be in a stalemate. The battle between Ming Zhan and Monk Formless was nearing its end. Ming Zhan's Buddhist Dharma was profound, and he had read countless secret manuals of the Buddhist monasteries at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. Furthermore, he had a pure heart and had a deep foundation. However, he was too young after all. Void reversions had a lifespan of 5,000 years, and he was only slightly more than 100 years old. In terms of experience, knowledge, and comprehension of life, he was far inferior compared to Monk Formless, who was already 3,000 years old. Most importantly, his Dao heart had yet to be established, and he was forced to retreat repeatedly against Monk Formless, who possessed a Dao heart. Su Zimo struggled to stand up. His essence spirit felt a tearing pain and his body could not help but sway. It was extremely difficult to heal such injuries on one's essence spirit. If he could not recover fully, even if he escaped, his cultivation would most likely stop at the nascent soul realm in the future. Looking at Su Zimo, who was not far away, a look of determination flashed through Demoness Ji's eyes. She had long made up her mind about this. She dodged Dao being Malevolent Earth's incoming bone spear and retreated, leaving the battlefield. Dao being Malevolent Earth was also frustrated by Demoness Ji's entanglement. When he saw her leave the battlefield, he did not continue pursuing. Demoness Ji extended her arms and raised her head slightly. She closed her legs and floated into the air. Her expression was pious as she chanted obscure words and looked at Su Zimo affectionately without blinking. Beside her, a mysterious force appeared. Immediately after, something seemed to be seeping out of her body endlessly, forming streams of milky white light that surged into Su Zimo's body through his head. Apart from the wounds on his primordial spirit, Su Zimo's internal and external injuries actually showed signs of healing. Furthermore, the most terrifying thing was that Su Zimo's aura continued to climb and was rushing toward the Void Return realm. On the other hand, Su Zimo's aura was rising while Demoness Ji's aura was weakening continuously. The light in her eyes gradually dimmed. This is, Dao being malevolent earth frowned, seemingly recalling something as he murmured softly, "Sacrifice." Right then, Dao being hidden death appeared and grit his teeth. "It's the sacrificial secret skill of pure maiden sect. Hurry and stop her." Dao being hidden death and Dao being malevolent earth attacked at the same time, charging towards Demoness Ji in midair. Right at this moment, a change occurred. The fairy stone statue that was initially standing on the empty ground suddenly burst forth with a bedazzling light that shot into the horizon. A legacy phenomenon had appeared. No one had expected someone to trigger the succession phenomenon at this crucial moment. However, who was it? The only two women on the battlefield were female cultivators of the fiend sex. How could they be related to the fairy stone statue? The eyes of the fairy stone statue emitted two mysterious lights that shrouded Demoness Ji. Demoness Ji, the pure maiden of the fiend sex, had obtained the inheritance of the fairy stone statue. When they saw that, all the cultivators widened their eyes in confusion. One had to know that this fairy statue was extremely famous. She had stood in the inheritance ground for countless years and nobody knew of her background. Neither did she leave behind any words or inheritance information. Over the years, countless female cultivators from the immortal sex had arrived beneath the stone statue in an attempt to obtain its recognition, but all of them returned empty-handed. To think that the fairy stone statue had already chosen a successor today. "We were all wrong," suddenly Dao being Heavenly Dipper said. Since ancient times, every cultivator who saw the ethereal stone statue would instinctively think that it was someone from the immortal sections. However, in reality, it was not a fairy but a demoness. The demoness stone statue stood there and unknowingly bewitched the eyes and minds of countless cultivators. For so many years nobody noticed it. That was the true brilliance of pure maiden sex bewitchment. Dao being hidden death and Dao being malevolent earth's attacks were repelled against the light emitted by the demoness stone statue. Now that the inheritance had been activated, nobody could hurt Demoness Ji anymore. However, at that moment her aura had already become extremely weak. There was a certain connection between her and Su Zimo. At the same time that Su Zimo was becoming stronger, he seemed to have absorbed all of her essence, dermic powers and essence spirit. Su Zimo wanted to sever it but there was no reaction. Once the connection was established, only Demoness Ji herself could sever it. Before long, Demoness Ji's aura was extremely weak, and she was like a mortal. As for Su Zimo, his aura became extremely berserk, and had already broken through the boundaries of the nascent soul realm. Of course, this was not a true breakthrough. He had merely obtained the power of another cultivator for a short period of time. Unless Su Zimo cultivated immediately and absorbed all the power in his body, there was no way he could break through to the void reversion realm. Demoness Ji looked at Su Zimo and felt her eyelids grow heavy, and she was mentally and physically exhausted. She was still trying her best to smile as she whispered to him, "Remember my words, you have to escape alive." It was only at that moment that Su Zimo understood the meaning behind Demoness Ji's words before the battle. As it turned out, Demoness Ji had already made the decision to sacrifice back then. What was a sacrifice? What did it have to do with a tripod? Even now, Su Zimo did not understand and had countless questions in his heart. However, he knew that this was not the time to consider that. He had to make use of the increase in his strength to escape with Ming Zhan. Demoness Ji's figure had already vanished. If she could obtain the recognition of the Demoness Stone statue, she would not be in danger for the time being and no one would be able to hurt her. While everyone was still in a daze, Su Zimo charged towards Ming Zhan in a flash. Swash! A gentle breeze blew and Su Zimo had already arrived before Ming Zhan. It was too fast. Although it was not the true power of the void reversion realm, that power was enough to change the tides of the battle. "How dare you!" Monk Formless hollered and strode forward, wanting to stop Su Zimo. Scram! Su Zimo gripped the creation Qinglian in reverse and smashed it towards Monk Formless. Monk Formless raised his wooden fish to block. Bang! If this was in the past, even if Su Zimo was at his peak, Monk Formless would only be pushed back half a step and his arms would go numb. But now, Monk Formless was sent flying by Su Zimo's creation Qinglian and fell to the ground. By the time he got up, his face was already pale. Chapter 10-11. Dao being Heavenly Dipper and Dao being Zephyr Thunder charged over from both sides. Kill! Su Zimo opened his mouth and released Thunderclap Kill once more. Thunder rumbled and shook one's mind. Gripping the creation Qinglian in his hands, Su Zimo collided viciously against the incoming saber. Clenching his right hand into a fist, he took the incoming Zephyr Thunder hammer head-on. Boom! With a loud bang, Dao being Heavenly Dipper was sent flying. Bang! Blood flashed and Su Zimo's right hand was smashed into a bloody mess, revealing the Scarlet Divine Phoenix bone. However, he repelled the Zephyr Thunder hammer. Right now, Su Zimo did not know what the so-called sacrifice was, and what Demoness Ji had sacrificed for him. However, at this very moment his body was surging with boundless power, even though that power did not belong to him yet. However, with that power, he was able to repel the few titular disciples temporarily, and had a chance of escaping. Evil will devour. When Dao being Malevolent Earth saw that Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the other two titular disciples were disadvantaged in melee combat, he conjured a top-tier dermic art of the sect and attacked Su Zimo. Endless malevolent chi spread out from his fingertips and formed a gigantic black head in midair. It howled over and covered the skies, opening its mouth to devour Su Zimo. Su Zimo's eyes lit up and with a single thought, a massive object appeared beneath his feet. The massive object had 4 legs and 2 heads. It carried a gigantic shell that was filled with mysterious ravines. It was ancient and seemed as though it could contain the secrets of the world. The shell supported the firmaments and its 4 legs were indomitable, like heavenly pillars that stepped on the torrent motionlessly. Groar! The turtle and snake reared their heads and roared. The black tortoise descended and the world trembled. No matter how strong Dao being Malevolent Earth's dermic art was, it could not devour the black tortoise. The 4 titular disciples were repelled by Su Zimo, and Dao being Hidden Death did not dare to show himself. Su Zimo seized the opportunity to grab the severely injured Ming Zhan and burst forth with lightning escape, speeding into the distance. The spectating cultivators were shocked. No one had expected that a single sacrifice by the pure maiden of the fiend sex would create a chance of survival for Su Zimo. There was a chance that he could escape from the encirclement of the 5 titular disciples. Seeing Su Zimo rushing towards them, the crowd was thrown into chaos. The cultivators all dodged, fearing that they would not be able to avoid him in time. A cultivator with a gloomy expression hid in the crowd and dodged along with everyone else. However, his gaze was still fixed on Su Zimo. Just as Su Zimo flew over his head, a cold light flashed in his eyes. He suddenly attacked and a dense shadow appeared, enveloping Su Zimo's back in an instant. Su Zimo was alarmed. Almost all of his attention was focused on the 5 titular disciples. He had not expected that there would be cultivators lying in ambush in the crowd. There were too many people who wanted to kill him in the Dao inheritance ground. Armor-piercing bone corrosion spike. A series of exclamations sounded from the crowd. Poison sect. The armor-piercing bone corrosion spike was one of the 7 lethals of poison sect, and was extremely terrifying with shocking penetrative power. Its poison was so strong that it would seep into one's bones and could not be removed. Behind Su Zimo, there were at least dozens of armor-piercing bone corrosion spikes that sealed off his escape routes. This was a top expert of poison sect. There were also a few armor-piercing bone corrosion spikes that shot towards Ming Zhan. Su Zimo pulled Ming Zhan in front of him and tried his best to avoid his vitals. However, there were more than 10 armor-piercing bone corrosion spikes that he could not avoid. Poof! 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 Half of them struck his inner armor and fell to the ground. However, 7 to 8 of them pierced his legs. Although his physique was strong and the armor-piercing bone corrosion spikes could not penetrate, the poison on the spikes had already surged into his body. The heavens truly want to kill this person. That's right. The one who attacks seems to be a titular disciple of poison sect. With so many titular disciples appearing one after another to attack him, It's a miracle that he can survive. Including Dao being poison, there were already 6 titular disciples involved in this battle. Su Zimo's body shuddered as he shook off the spikes on his leg. Turning around, he glared at Dao being poison, who was in the crowd, and was enraged. His eyes were filled with endless killing intent as he said coldly, "Have a death wish." Not far away, Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the others had already caught up. If he wanted to kill Dao being poison, he had to do it within a single move. Otherwise, if he was entangled by Dao being poison and surrounded by Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the others, his previous efforts would have been wasted. 2 balls of flames burned in Su Zimo's eyes as he conjured hand seals and tapped gently with his fingertips. A ball of golden flames floated towards the poison sect cultivator. Immediately after, Su Zimo conjured another dermic seal, and a scarlet flame was conjured on his fingertip, bursting forth. Buddhist Dao Fire. Immortal Dao Fire. The 2 balls of flames crashed towards poison Daoists one after another. Initially, Dao being poison wanted to dodge. However, when he sensed the power emitted by the 2 balls of flames, he could not help but sneer. The power of these 2 balls of flames was not small, but to him it was nothing. Now that everyone was watching as a titular disciple, he naturally had to reveal his capabilities. With that in mind, poison Daoist's hands continuously formed hand seals, condensing into a colorful python of magic power that swallowed the 2 balls of flames that were crashing toward him. When he saw that, Su Zimo's gaze turned cold and his spirit consciousness moved slightly. The immortal Dao Fire that was initially behind suddenly accelerated and collided with the Buddhist Dao Fire. This was the change in the art of fire taming. If Su Zimo had conjured the Dvyadi Dao Fire right away, he would have scared Dao being poison away beforehand. The 2 balls of Dao Fire stacked together and underwent a qualitative change instantly, causing their might to increase exponentially. Dvyadi Dao Fire. Before Dao being poison's dermic power python could reach him, it was burned into nothingness by the Dvyadi Dao Fire. Dao being poison's pupils constricted violently. At this distance, it was already too late for him to dodge. Su Zimo sneered and no longer looked at Dao being poison. Purple lightning flashed on his body and a pair of dermic power wings grew behind him, carrying Ming Zhan. He fled into the distance with all his might. Behind him, the Dvyadi Dao Fire collided with Dao being poison and burst into a gigantic ball of flames. Oh! Flames burned and smoke billowed. Dao being poison was already burned into a gigantic fireball, as he flailed his arms and struggled continuously. His blood chi surged and his dermic power surged, wanting to suppress the Dvyadi Dao Fire. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Countless venomous creatures fell from his body. Scorpions, toads, spiders and all sorts of venomous creatures shrieked and were burned to ashes before long. Before Dao being poison died, the venomous creatures on his body were burned by the Dvyadi Dao Fire and in their panic, they devoured their masters. Countless venomous creatures bit Dao's poison in the blink of an eye. Even if the Dvyadi Dao Fire did not burn Dao being poisoned to death, those venomous creatures were enough to kill him. Even his essence spirit could not escape from the raging flames, and was burned to death while hiding in his consciousness. The titular disciple of Poison Sect died in the Dao inheritance ground. Chapter 10-12. Su Zimo clutched Ming Zhan beneath his ribs and sprinted into the distance. Ming Zhan's injuries were not serious. However, he was suppressed by Monk Formless because he was constantly arguing about Buddhism while fighting and was at a disadvantage. As a result, his Dao heart that he was about to condense showed signs of collapsing. If his Dao heart collapsed, his past cultivation would be for naught. Nobody could help him at this juncture. The interrogation of one's Dao heart was a huge calamity for cultivators. As long as they could tide through this calamity, they would not be tainted by evil or mental demons in the future. If they could not tide through it, everything would be over. What's the purpose of my cultivation? Ming Zhan murmured softly with a dazed expression. Long life and long vision nirvana? Ming Zhan shook his head and denied that thought. The reason why I cultivate Buddhism is to deliver all living beings from torment. However, Monk Formless told me that there are countless living beings and countless suffering victims. There's a limit to a person's strength. How can I possibly deliver all of them? That's right. How can I possibly deliver all of them from torment? Is my Tao wrong? Is it true that I can only deliver all living beings from torment by pursuing my own Tao and cultivating to become a Buddha? Mingzhan muttered to himself and questioned his Tao heart countless times. Throughout the entire process, Su Zimo could clearly sense that his Tao heart wavered countless times before stabilizing eventually. Furthermore, as time passed by, the glint in Mingzhan's eyes turned brighter. That kind of gaze was sincere, pure, and flawless. I don't want to become a Buddha. As though he had made a decision, Mingzhan's eyes shone brightly as he said slowly, only by delivering all living beings from torment can I attain Bodhi. I swear that I won't become a Buddha until hell is empty. Mingzhan made a grand wish and established his Tao heart. Boom! The entire world trembled. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. Immediately after, a gigantic crack appeared beneath his feet. It was dark and sinister, as though it led to the 9 hells. Su Zimo focused his gaze with a shocked expression. Under the 9 underworlds, ghostly shadows were everywhere. Countless ferocious vengeful spirits and evil spirits were stretching out their arms, as if trying to break free. However, above the heads of these vengeful spirits and evil spirits was a Buddhist monk. His entire body was shining with a sacred golden light. His expression was compassionate and his eyes were merciful. It was as if he could overcome all the sufferings in the world. The eminent monk of Buddhism suddenly opened his mouth. Only when all living beings are liberated can one attain Bodhi. If hell is not emptied, one will not become a Buddha. Make this great vow and obtain my inheritance. Voila! A blinding golden light burst forth from the eminent monk's body and scattered onto Mingzhan's body. Mingzhan's eyes were tightly shut and his expression was serene. Like a sleeping baby, he gradually fell into the crack uncontrollably along with the golden light. Rumble! The crack in the ground closed up and Mingzhan and the Buddhist monk had already disappeared. At the same time in Tianhuang mainland, all of a sudden, a voice rang out in the sky. Only when all living beings are liberated can one attain Bodhi. If hell is not emptied, one will not become a Buddha. Many cultivators were shocked when they heard that. Someone had established a Tao heart that penetrated the space of the Tao inheritance ground and affected Tianhuang mainland. 100 Refinement Sect. Extreme Fire and the others were initially gathered in the main hall. When they heard the voice outside, they walked out of the hall one after another and looked up. He has obtained the inheritance of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva of the Buddhist monasteries. A look of shock flashed through Shangguanzi's eyes. Extreme Fire nodded. That's right. Legend has it that when Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva of the upper world established his Tao, he made a great vow that he would not become a Buddha until hell was emptied. I wonder who it was that had such a compassionate heart to inherit Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's great vow, and cause Tianhuang mainland to tremble. Ksitigarbha Golden Body, Elder Gu revealed a reminiscing expression. To think that this inheritance that has been severed for ages is finally about to reappear. There's going to be a lot to watch in the next Dharma characteristic ranking. Right then, a cultivator fell out of the teleportation gate behind him, panting heavily. This was the 100 Refinement Sect disciple, who followed Tao Being Yuding into the Tao inheritance ground. Extreme Fire and the others entered the hall hurriedly and asked, "How is it? Any news?" Reporting to the elders, the cultivator gulped and could not conceal the shock in his eyes as he panted. Not long after Granduncle Master entered the Tao inheritance ground, he fought against the sword cultivators of Sword Sect and killed all of them. Shangguanzi and the others exchanged glances and nodded secretly. To think that after entering the Tao inheritance ground, Su Zimo could still release such terrifying combat strength despite his demon methods being suppressed. Extreme Fire's expression was normal. After all, no titular disciples of Sword Sect entered. Even with the 7 luminary sword formation, it was not much of a threat to Su Zimo. The 100 Refinement Sect cultivator continued. A day later, Granduncle Master encountered Tao Being Glass and killed him. When they heard that, Extreme Fire and the others were shocked. To think that apart from super sects such as Heavenly Dipper Sect and Chaos Essence Sect, Glass Palace would also send titular disciples in. What was even more unexpected was that the titular disciple of Glass Palace would be killed by Su Zimo in the Dao inheritance ground. Too strong. Elder Gu gasped. This lad wants to step on the corpses of titular disciples to establish his Dao heart and forge a supreme great Dao. The 100 Refinement sect disciple continued, Dao being Heavenly Dipper, Dao being Zephyr Thunder, Monk Formless, Dao being Malevolent Earth, and Dao being Hidden Death joined forces to set up a trap to kill Granduncle Master. Ah! The expressions of extreme fire and the others changed starkly as they exclaimed. What they were worried about still happened. If 5 titular disciples joined forces, there was no way they would survive. Later on, Granduncle Master obtained the help of the Fiend Sect's Pure Maiden and Dao being Randang and escaped. Later on, he was ambushed by a titular disciple of Poison Sect and killed Dao being Poison instead. He has already escaped. Everyone's hearts fluctuated as they listened to the news. Although it was just a simple description, it was already so soul-stirring. One could imagine how dangerous the situation was back then. The 2 titular disciples were buried in the Dao inheritance ground. Shangguanzi shook her head worriedly. This is a huge blow to the heavens. I'm afraid a calamity will descend. There's no need for a calamity. Elder Gu shook his head. That lad might not even be able to survive the calamity in front of him. Even Poison Sect can't resolve the 7 lethals of Poison Sect. How far can he escape? Don't forget, Dean hasn't appeared yet. Elder Gu shook his head and sighed. Everyone frowned with worried expressions. No matter how they looked at it, Su Zimo's life was hanging by a thread. Even the slightest change could be the last straw that broke his back. At the same time, news of the Dao inheritance ground spread to Tianhuang mainland one after another, and the entire cultivation world was in an uproar. So many titular disciples entered the Dao inheritance ground, but 2 of them were killed by Jining Jinjuan. This was definitely an unprecedented event in history. It was not only 100 Refinement sect. At that moment, almost all the factions in Tianhuang mainland were paying attention to the news of the Dao inheritance ground. Everyone wanted to know how long the number 1 monster incarnate of history, who caused a bloodbath in the Dao inheritance ground, could last. Chapter 10:13. Dao inheritance ground. After obtaining the inheritance, Ming Zhen would naturally not be in any danger after entering the depths of the ground. Su Zimo was relieved as well. Thunder rumbled in the distance. With that slight delay, Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the others had already caught up. Gritting his teeth, Su Zimo determined the direction and sped towards the 3 Tribulations domain. Right now, he could only resolve the crisis by entering the 3 Tribulations domain. As long as one entered the 3 Tribulations domain, cultivators could not fight. This was also a reason why many ancient mighty figures wanted to prevent anyone from disturbing them during their tribulations. However, Su Zimo did not know if he could survive and escape to the 3 Tribulations domain. The poison of the armor-piercing bone corrosion nail had already acted up. If not for his strong physique and shocking physique, the poison would have corroded his bones long ago, and he would have died a long time ago. In reality, if Su Zimo could use his blood qi, and use the power of his blood qi to cleanse the poison continuously, there was a high chance that he could resolve it. But now, his blood qi was condensed in his body and he could not move at all. He could only watch as the bone corrosion poison spread and corroded continuously. At that moment, his legs were already numb. If he could no longer feel his legs, it would mean that the bone corrosion poison had already invaded his bone marrow. Even if he recovered his blood qi, he might not be able to save them. Before long, a figure appeared before him. Black hair draped over his shoulders and he wore purple robes. His back was facing Su Zimo and his appearance could not be seen clearly. However, just the back view standing there was like an unreachable mountain, majestic and imposing, blocking Su Zimo's path. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. Although he could not see the purple-robed cultivator's appearance clearly, he was all too familiar with the aura of a ruler that looked down on the world. Dao being Chaos Essence Dean. To think that Dean would appear at the final juncture. It was as though a person who was about to climb out of an abyss after painstakingly looking up only to realize that he had merely climbed out of a deep pit. There was an even larger abyss above his head. Even Su Zimo, who had just entered the Dao inheritance ground, had no confidence against Diin. Not to mention that both his essence divinities were injured now, causing him to be in intense pain while his legs were gradually losing feeling. Fellow Taoist Su, how have you been? Diin slowly turned around and looked at Su Zimo, who was covered in blood and looked extremely miserable. He smiled faintly. Su Zimo's face was cold and he didn't say a word. Diin chuckled softly and walked towards Su Zimo slowly, saying in a leisurely manner, "It's truly unbelievable. Back then, you were in the limelight in Myriad Phenomenon City. How did the mighty number 1 of the phenomenon ranking fall to such a state? Where's your torch dragon eye? Where's your demon blood transforming dragon?" Diin laughed. At this moment he was smiling from the bottom of his heart. Felt good to be in control of everything, especially when the great enemy who had brought him endless humiliation and almost killed him was standing right in front of him. The power of life and death was in his hands. Since ancient times there have been countless geniuses. However, only a few have been able to make it to the end. Diin said indifferently, "You Su Zimo are destined to die young." Boom! Killing intent surged in Diin's eyes as he opened his palm. Like a gigantic millstone, it crushed down towards Su Zimo's chest. Great Chaos Essence Palm. Chaos Essence Sect's secret skill. Just as Su Zimo wanted to defend, he realized that he could no longer feel his legs. Finally, this was the end of it. Without feeling in his legs, he could not support his strength. There was no way he could withstand the Great Chaos Essence Palm purely with the burst of his physical body. In a flash, Su Zimo wanted to conjure a dermic art. However, a tearing pain came from his essence spirit in his consciousness. Before the dermic art could be conjured, it dissipated. A look of mockery flashed through Diin's eyes. Bang! His palm pressed down on Su Zimo's chest and released a crushing and killing power that was violent and ferocious. Shing! Su Zimo's green robe shattered instantly. The perfect grade inner armor on his upper body lasted for a moment before it was crushed into pieces by the power of the Great Chaos Essence Palm and fell to the ground. A perfect grade Dao being dermic weapon could not withstand the power of Diin's palm strike. Diin was even more terrifying than 100 years ago. Not only that, the remaining power of the Great Chaos Essence Palm surged and burst forth, surging into Su Zimo's body and shattering the power that Demoness Ji transferred to him. Su Zimo fell not far away and coughed out mouthfuls of blood. His organs were already ruptured by Diin's palm strike. "You're finished." Diin strode towards Su Zimo leisurely. Right then, a figure barged in and grabbed Su Zimo on the ground before sprinting into the distance. That figure had long been in Diin's line of sight. However, he had not expected that someone would dare to snatch someone right in front of him. "Master, hang in there. I'll bring you away." Solitary Cloud hugged Su Zimo and sprinted on the ground with his physical burst, looking clumsy and pitiful. "Master, let's return to Howling Moon Mountain. There's Monkey Ling Hu and Little Fox there. No one will dare to hurt you in Howling Moon Mountain." Solitary Cloud looked at Su Zimo, who was coughing out blood continuously with a sorrowful expression and bloodshot eyes. Su Zimo's consciousness was starting to blur. "Solitary Cloud, hurry. Let go of me. I'll escape myself." Su Zimo's gaze was a little unfocused as he stuttered. Blood flowed continuously from his mouth in a frightening manner. "Master, don't speak anymore. I won't leave." Solitary Cloud shouted. "I once swore that I would follow you through life and death. I, Solitary Cloud, am a man of my word and will never leave." "You don't know who Diin is." Su Zimo tried his best to stay awake and not faint as he panted. "If he wants to attack, you won't be able to escape. You'll only be able to live if you abandon me." "You're wrong." Diin's voice suddenly sounded in Solitary Cloud's ears. That aura caused a chill to run down his spine. "Even if he abandons you right now, he won't be able to escape." Diin smiled sinisterly and struck directly, slapping Solitary Cloud's back heavily. Poof! Solitary Cloud's chest was penetrated by Diin's palm, and a stream of blood spewed out. The hot scarlet blood splattered on Su Zimo's face, causing him to be startled awake. "Solitary Cloud!" Su Zimo shouted and reached out in a panic, wanting to stop the blood from Solitary Cloud's chest. However, blood gushed out like a fountain and could not be stopped no matter what. Solitary Cloud's heart was already shattered, and his essence spirit was filled with cracks. The bones in Solitary Cloud's chest were all broken. However, his eyes were still widened and he staggered forward with difficulty with his final bit of willpower. Right from the beginning, he did not let go of Su Zimo's arms. Step by step, step by step. Finally, Solitary Cloud's body swayed and he lowered his gaze, murmuring, "Master, I can't hold on any longer. I can only bring you here." Solitary Cloud. Su Zimo's voice trembled and he could no longer hold it in as tears streamed down his sleeves. Chapter 10:14. Is it painful? Dean looked at the current state Su Zimo was in and could not help but laugh with the pleasure of revenge. He enjoyed the current feeling. The more pain Su Zimo was in, the happier he was. "Do you remember what I said in the primordial battlefield?" Dean looked down at Su Zimo from above and said slowly, "I said that I would definitely take revenge when we meet again." Su Zimo grit his teeth and remained silent. With reddened eyes, he controlled his spirit consciousness and dragged Solitary Cloud into his storage bag bit by bit. It was just a simple action, but his primordial spirit felt like it was being torn apart, and he almost fainted. If not for the fact that Solitary Cloud had once followed him and absorbed the dragon chi to cultivate and strengthen his bloodline, Solitary Cloud's essence spirit would have been destroyed by Di Yin's palm strike. Although Solitary Cloud was not dead, he could not hold on for long. This palm of Di Yin's virtually crippled his fleshly body completely. His heart was shattered, his sternum shattered and his life force was severed. Only his essence spirit was still shrouded by a hint of vitality and emitted a weak glow. By the looks of it, the glow on Solitary Cloud's essence spirit would dim forever in less than 2 hours. Right now, Su Zimo's life was hanging by a thread, but he did not give up on Solitary Cloud. Even if there was only a slim chance of survival, he had to leave with Solitary Cloud. Solitary Cloud's vow to follow him in life and death was not the only thing. It was also his promise to Solitary Cloud. Sigh to think that Su Zimo would still die in Di Yin's hands in the end. Including the fallen Dao being glass, Dao being poison and now Di Yin, there are a total of 8 titular disciples attacking him. Even the void reversion Dharma Dao Jun will have to die here, let alone Jining Zhenjuan. Although this battle was too unfair for Su Zimo, there's nothing much to say about the winner. From today onwards, I'm afraid no one will be able to threaten Di Yin anymore. At that moment, many cultivators had already gathered nearby and watched with conflicted expressions. Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the others also arrived nearby. They did not step forward and merely watched coldly from the side. Actually, you don't have to suffer. Di Yin did not want to waste any more time. He walked towards Su Zimo and said calmly, "Because I will fulfill your wishes and send you both down the path of Acheron." Boom! Di Yin stretched out his palm and formed a huge millstone that pressed down on Su Zimo. Suddenly, a dark light tore through the air and expanded rapidly in midair, as though it had transformed into a pitch-black brick. It shone with 6 dermic patterns and charged towards Di Yin's palm. Xiantian Daoist artifact. Di Yin's eyes shone brightly as killing intent surged in them. Who would dare to make a move in front of him? Cries of surprise could be heard from the crowd. Who was Di Yin? In the cultivation world, he might only be a titular disciple. However, in this Dao inheritance ground, Di Yin was the king, the son of heaven. The wrath of the son of heaven could cause millions of corpses to fall. Even Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the other titular disciples were wary of Di Yin and did not advance. Which cultivator in this Dao inheritance ground would be so blind as to attack him? You must have a death wish. Even though he was barehanded, Di Yin had no intention of stopping against a Khanate Daoist dermic weapon. His blood chi surged and dermic power surged, doubling the power of his great chaos essence palm. Boom! The gigantic millstone formed by Di Yin's palm collided with the black brick with a deafening bang. At the point of collision, air currents surged and gravel filled the air. Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the other titular disciples were shocked and their pupils constricted slightly. Di Yin was even more terrifying than they had imagined. Among all the titular disciples, Including the fallen Dao being glass, Diyin was probably the only one who dared to receive a connate dermic weapon bare-handed. Both sides clashed head-on and Diyin did not retreat at all. However, the black brick flew back and landed in the hands of a cultivator who charged over. The person was dressed in gray Taoist robes and had a fair, beardless face. He was slightly plump, but his movement technique was extremely agile. The intruder made use of the fact that the black brick was blocking Diyin to rush forward. With a flip of his hand, he carried Su Zimo, who was lying on the ground, and fled without even turning back. It's you. Diyin's gaze was sinister as he was enraged. In a flash he sped forward. His figure tore through the air at such a fast speed and ferocious momentum that a buzzing sound could be heard in midair. It was soul-stirring. Even if you're the successor of Enigma Palace, I'll kill you here today for ruining my plans. Diyin chased after the gray-robed cultivator with a bone-chilling voice and endless killing intent in his eyes. He had to kill Su Zimo in the Dao inheritance ground, and not allow any accidents to happen. He would kill anyone who stood in his way. The successor of Enigma Palace has appeared as well. Is Su Zimo related to Enigma Palace? By the looks of it, the successor of Enigma Palace isn't a match for Diyin either. He escaped after a single exchange. When they saw that, many cultivators were invigorated and discussed once more. Enigma Palace was the most mysterious supersect in Tianhuang mainland. The so-called 9 immortal sects, 8 demon regions, and the final 2 islands in one palace referred to Enigma Palace. The successor of Enigma Palace was equivalent to the titular disciples of the supersections. However, they rarely participated in such fights. Be it the Jindan phenomenon ranking or the Heaven and Earth Dharma characteristic ranking, the successors of Enigma Palace would not participate in the fight. Therefore, every successor of Enigma Palace was the most mysterious existence in the eyes of the cultivators. Nobody knew their true strength. However, the seniors of the various sects would instruct their disciples to try their best not to be enemies with the successors of Enigma Palace. Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the other titular disciples frowned and followed hurriedly. Su Zimo's death was already a foregone conclusion. How could anything change because of a single disciple of Enigma Palace? The gray-robed cultivator sprinted the entire way. However, he heard the wind howling behind him as a powerful and violent aura closed in rapidly. The gray-robed cultivator glanced sideways. Diyin was following not far behind him with a dark expression and killing intent. His movement technique was frighteningly fast and he would catch up within more than 10 breaths. K. The gray-robed cultivator was shocked. He swiped his storage bag and took out a dirty and tattered bag. He muttered something and tossed it behind him. The tattered bag floated and expanded continuously, trapping Diyin, who was charging over. The mouth of the bag constricted rapidly. Diyin's furious roar sounded from within the bag, causing one's heart to shudder. This disciple of Enigma Palace is indeed capable. He seems to have trapped Diyin. A cultivator exclaimed. The gray-robed cultivator grinned and turned to continue running. That was because he knew that although the tattered bag was a unique treasure, it could not trap Diyin. Before long, a roar sounded from behind him. Let's see where you can escape to. Diyin tore the bag and broke free. He was filled with killing intent and rage as he chased after the gray-robed cultivator. Chapter 10:15. Brother Lin, you're here too. Lying on the back of the gray-robed cultivator, Su Zimo swallowed a large number of elixirs, and the rumbling medicinal effects spread into his body. His condition improved slightly as he spoke softly. The disciple of Enigma Palace was none other than Lin Xuanji. A friend in need was a friend indeed. Su Zimo did not have many friends ever since he started cultivating. Among them, some were frivolous, some were honest, some were cold and murderous, while some were just toying around. Their personalities were different, and the Tao techniques they cultivated were also different. Immortal sects, Buddhist sects, fiend sects, and heretical sections. However, there was something in common about them. All of them were sincere and righteous people. That was the case for Demonist Ji, Mingzhan, and Lin Xuanji. Even Solitary Cloud was the same. Demonist Ji and Mingzhan had both obtained the inheritance of mighty figures, and it could be considered as a blessing in disguise. As for Solitary Cloud, Su Zimo's heart ached at the thought of Solitary Cloud. Lin Xuanji asked with a worried expression, "Brother Su, how are you?" "Still all right." Su Zimo forced himself to be spirited and replied. Actually, he was in a terrible state. His organs were already ruptured and his essence spirit was severely injured as well. The bone corrosion poison in his legs had already seeped into his bone marrow and was spreading gradually. Su Zimo's spirit consciousness shifted and he withdrew a small bottle from his storage bag, pouring out an elixir. Lin Xuanji caught a glimpse of it with a delighted expression. Life preservation elixir. That's something good. Hurry and swallow it. At the very least you can preserve your life. We'll talk about it after we escape. Su Zimo did not say anything. Instead, he placed the life preservation elixir carefully into Solitary Cloud's mouth. The life preservation elixir could preserve Solitary Cloud's life for at least a month. Screech! Lin Xuanji's eyes widened and he nearly stomped his feet in anxiety, yelling, "Are you stupid? You can't even hold on for much longer and you still care about that WRM?" "I'm fine." Su Zimo's lips twitched as he smiled. "But he can't die." "How are you fine? How much longer can you last in your current state? How do you cure the bone-corroding poison in your body?" The reason why they are called the poison sect's 7 lethals is because even the poison sect themselves do not have an antidote for these 7 poisons. Anyone who is afflicted by them will definitely die. If not for the fact that he was being hunted down by Diin, Lin Xuanji truly wanted to throw Su Zimo down and give him a good scolding. His injuries are a little serious, but he shouldn't die. Su Zimo could still smile. Even though his bloodline had been suppressed and he was unable to circulate it, his bloodline was still in his body. It was still terrifyingly powerful and impervious to all poisons. It was impossible for the bone-corroding poison to kill him. However, if he wanted to expel the bone-eroding poison from his body, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. At the very least, it was impossible for him to do so in his current state. "Brother Su, you have to hold on. I've already offended Diin and now you're dead. I've really gotten myself into trouble and made a wasted trip." Lin Xuanji muttered as he carried Su Zimo on his back and fled, as though he was afraid that Su Zimo would faint and never wake up. "My master divined that you'll definitely face a calamity this time round, so I hurried over." Damned old man, the older he gets, the more muddle-headed he gets. All he does is spout nonsense. You entered the Dao inheritance ground and faced so many titular disciples. Even if King think with my butt, I can tell that you're going to face a calamity. Is there a need to divine it? Initially, Su Zimo was truly about to faint. However, he could not help but chuckle when he heard Lin Xuanji's interesting words. He knew that Lin Xuanji was thinking of ways to save him and keep him awake. Lin Xuanji turned back and was so scared that his face turned pale as he cursed. F***Sika. Dean is chasing so closely like a mad dog. He's trying to kill me. Lin Xuanji's movement technique could not compare to Di Yin's. If not for the fact that he just now had delayed Diin for a while with that lousy bag, Diin would have caught up to him long ago. "Brother Lin, listen to me." Su Zimo perked up and raised his arms slightly, pointing in a direction. "Go there." "Ah." Lin Xuanji was stunned for a moment before he was delighted. "Brother Su, you have a backup plan over there? Impressive, brilliant." Without hesitation, Lin Xuanji changed directions and sprinted. After fleeing for a while more, Lin Xuanji gradually realized that something was amiss and frowned. "Brother Su, what backup plan do you have here? This direction seems to be the Three Tribulations domain?" "It's the Three Tribulations domain," Su Zimo said. "Throw me into the Three Tribulations domain and leave this place. Dean wants to kill me, not you." "Are you crazy?" Lin Xuanji shouted. "You still want to barge into the Three Tribulations domain in your current state? What's the difference between barging into the Three Tribulations domain and courting death?" "The Three Tribulations domain tests a cultivator's Dao heart. Although I'm severely injured, my Dao heart is still there." Su Zimo's tone was resolute as he said slowly, "I'll definitely be able to obtain the inheritance within the Three Tribulations domain." But Lin Xuanji was still worried. Su Zimo continued, "Furthermore, I'm currently poisoned. Given my current state and methods, There's no way I can dispel it. You want to make use of the power of the three tribulations domain. Lin Xuanji's eyes lit up. That's right. Su Zimo nodded. I can only dispel the bone corrosion poison that has already seeped into my bones with the help of external forces. But that's way too painful. Lin Xuanji shuddered at the thought of it. Su Zimo said, Brother Lin, the three tribulations domain is my only chance. Sensing Su Zimo's determination, Lin Xuanji grit his teeth. Let's go. I'll bring you to the three tribulations domain. If you die inside and turn into a wandering ghost, don't come looking for me. Don't worry, Su Zimo smiled gently. Now that he had made that decision, Lin Xuanji no longer hesitated. Taking a deep breath of air, he sped in the direction of the three tribulations domain. Not long after, an enormous and vast area of ice and frost appeared on the horizon ahead. Cold winds whistled within it, connecting the heavens and the earth, and it swept up numerous hurricanes with a shocking momentum. Where are they going? Are they going to barge into the three tribulations domain? Isn't that just sending themselves to their deaths? I reckon that Su Zimo would rather die in the three tribulations domain than be killed by Di'in. The group of cultivators discussed among themselves as they gathered over. Before long, Lin Xuanji arrived at the edge of the three tribulations domain. Brother Su, this is as far as I can send you. Lin Xuanji stopped in his tracks and sprinted the entire way. A thin layer of sweat had already formed on his forehead as he panted slightly. He knew that this farewell was very likely to be the last farewell between the two of them. Send me in. Su Zimo endured the pain in his body and smiled. Don't worry, we'll meet again. Brother Su, have a safe journey. Lin Xuanji grit his teeth and yanked Su Zimo off his back, throwing him into the three tribulations domain before him. Su Zimo was instantly drowned by the cold wind and disappeared. The cold wind inside was laced with frost that could isolate one's spirit consciousness and vision. The cultivators standing outside did not know what was going on inside. Even if they entered, the visibility was extremely low. Lin Xuanji threw Su Zimo into the three tribulations domain and fled to the side. Barge into the three tribulations domain? Di'in arrived at the edge of the three tribulations domain and ignored Lin Xuanji beside him. He merely sneered, it's just a temporary delay. Let's see how long you can last in the three tribulations domain. Hesitating for a moment, Di'in entered the three tribulations domain as well. Immediately after, Dao being Heavenly Dipper, Dao being Zephyr Thunder, Monk Formless and Dao being Malevolent Earth arrived as well. Even Dao being Hidden Death had appeared. The 5 titular disciples exchanged glances and entered the three tribulations domain almost at the same time. Chapter 10:16. When they saw that, all the cultivators were shocked. For the sake of Su Zimo, 6 titular disciples have barged into the three tribulations domain at the same time. This is an unprecedented spectacle. Su Zimo's death is a foregone conclusion. The only reason the 6 titular disciples entered is to split the treasures. Although cultivators were not allowed to fight within the three tribulations domain, if the cultivators inside died, the treasures dropped would naturally become ownerless. Anyone who saw it could take it away at any time. Some cultivators who could not hold back their curiosity followed into the three tribulations domain. However, most of them walked out trembling the moment they entered. Some cultivators were pale and their beards were covered in frost as their bodies trembled uncontrollably. Some cultivators were already injured and the blood they coughed out was laced with ice shards. Not everyone could attempt the three tribulations domain. Even so, more and more cultivators gathered here. Most of them stood outside and waited for the final outcome. Middle Continent, 100 Refinement Sect. Avoid Reversion retreated from the Dao Inheritance ground in advance and recounted everything that happened inside. The entire hall was silent. He was poisoned and severely injured by Di'in. After entering the three tribulations domain, his fate was unknown. None of the news was beneficial to Su Zimo. Everyone's expression was solemn as they remained silent. Everyone knew that entering the three tribulations domain was equivalent to announcing Su Zimo's death. Throughout history, no one had been able to pass through the three tribulations domain. However, Su Zimo had no way out. Behind him were the 6 titular disciples. He would die if he advanced or retreated. Extreme Fire's expression was terrible and his eyes surged with endless rage. A moment later, Shangguanzi sighed softly. Right now we can only leave it to fate. At the same time, news of what happened in the Dao inheritance ground spread to Tianhuang mainland one after another. The entire cultivation world was in an uproar. Dean failed to kill Su Zimo even with his attack, and allowed him to escape to the 3 Tribulations domain? This Su Zimo is really lucky. There shouldn't be any unforeseen events this time. After entering the 3 Tribulations domain, Su Zimo has no way out. He can only continue forward. That's right. Since ancient times there have been countless geniuses and monsters, but no one has been able to clear the 3 Tribulations domain. What's more, I heard that he has been poisoned and is seriously injured. The number 1 monster of all times, in the end, failed to become a legend, vanishing into thin air. The moment Su Zimo entered the 3 Tribulations domain, he felt a bone-piercing chill. A layer of frost instantly condensed on his body. Woo-woo. A cold wind blew against his face. This wind was even more powerful than divine weapons. Like a steel needle, it pierced through Su Zimo's flesh and blew into his organs. Su Zimo's face was pale. He clenched his teeth and curled up in pain. His organs were already severely injured to begin with. Now that he was blown by the extreme northeast wind, his organs were instantly covered in frost. Su Zimo could not feel his legs and could only rely on his arms to crawl forward bit by bit. His entire body was shuddering and his gaze was resolute. The deeper he went, the more vicious the wind became. Initially, the wind was like a steel needle. Towards the end, the wind was like a sharp saber that sliced across Su Zimo's body repeatedly. The wind was like a knife and was extremely painful. This pain was not something that humans could endure. Poof! 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 Su Zimo's body was already lacerated by the wind. Before he bled, his wounds were already frozen. He was not wrong. The original intention of the 3 Tribulations domain was to test a cultivator's Tao heart. However, the first 2 trials, the extreme northeast wind and red lotus karmic fire, tested a cultivator's body and will. Without a strong physique and will to endure endless pain, one would not be able to obtain the recognition of many ancient mighty figures. The further he crawled, the stronger the wind would be. Towards the end, the wind had already penetrated Su Zimo's flesh and slashed against his bones, slicing back and forth with an ear-piercing sound. The wind was bone-chilling. Su Zimo was in so much pain that his body trembled continuously, almost spasming. Even so, he did not make a single sound. Suddenly, a look of joy appeared in Su Zimo's eyes. Initially, his legs were corroded by the bone corrosion poison and he could not feel them. However, as the wind scraped against his bones continuously, his legs gradually felt pain. It became clearer and more intense. Su Zimo's features were contorted from the pain. However, he smiled. This meant that the extreme northeast wind could indeed dispel the bone corrosion poison. Enduring the pain, Su Zimo struggled to stand up from the ground. His gaze was even more resolute as he headed towards the depths of the 3 Tribulations domain. Behind him, there were 6 other figures who were struggling to move forward. Although Dean and the others were titular disciples, they had to endure the pain of being sliced by the wind after entering the 3 Tribulations domain. Slash after slash. Slash after slash on the bones. With every step they took, the 6 of them would tremble. However, they persevered and glared at the figure that was crawling forward slowly. They waited for the figure to stop. They did not believe that they could not survive a poisoned and severely injured Jining Xinjuan. However, before long, under their gazes, the figure stood up amidst the rumbling cold wind and walked forward step by step. Dao being malevolent earth could not hold it in and wanted to curse. However, instantly, the wind entered his mouth and cut open his mouth. He swallowed the rest of his words. What a lunatic! Dao being malevolent earth roared internally. Dao being hidden death walked slower and slower, already thinking of retreating. His initial goal was to assassinate Su Zimo. He entered the Three Tribulations domain to see if he could fish in troubled waters and snatch one or two treasures from Su Zimo. But now he did not want to persevere anymore. If he continued, he might not be able to obtain Su Zimo's treasures and might even die in the extreme northern wind. No matter what, Su Zimo was bound to die. His goal would be considered as accomplished. At that thought, Dao being hidden death stopped in his tracks and retreated slowly. When he saw Dao being hidden death retreat, Dao being malevolent earth wavered as well. Among the 6 titular disciples, the only one who did not waver and continued forward was Di. Snatching Su Zimo's treasures was only one of the reasons. More importantly, he had to see Su Zimo die personally before he could feel at ease. This time round, he had lured Su Zimo into the Dao inheritance ground. If he could not kill the latter, he would not have such a chance in the future. The Yin wind howled and the air was cold. The wounds on Su Zimo's body increased in number in a shocking manner. The pain in his legs intensified as well. However, as though he could not feel it, Su Zimo's footsteps became firmer. If he wanted to establish his Dao, he would definitely have to endure endless suffering and danger. Moreover, these hardships and dangers would constantly temper his Dao heart. In the end, it would allow him to transform, be reborn, and condense a supreme Dao heart that didn't fear the heavens, the earth, ghosts, gods, or evil. Chapter 10:17. Outside the Three Tribulations domain. More and more cultivators gathered and peered into the place. They've been inside for an hour, right? No one has come out yet. Could Su Zimo still be alive? These titular disciples are truly terrifying. We can't even last a few breaths inside. To think that they can last so long. Look, someone's coming out. A figure gradually became clearer and walked out of the Three Tribulations domain, covered in frost. It was Dao being hidden death. Dao being hidden death stood at the edge of the Three Tribulations domain expressionlessly and tried his best to recover his blood qi. He swallowed a few elixirs before letting out a long breath. After calming down for a long time, his figure swayed and gradually blurred, disappearing from everyone's sight. A wave of exclamations sounded from the crowd. It had to be said that such a concealment technique could already deceive the world and communicate with ghosts and gods. Dao being hidden death did not leave. He still had to wait for the final outcome. After another 15 minutes, another figure appeared in the Three Tribulations domain. Dao being malevolent earth. Dao being malevolent earth was not in a good state either, as though he had suffered quite a bit. He shuddered and even the aura he exhaled was filled with frost. He truly could not hold on any longer. The reason why Dao being Heavenly Dipper and the others could persevere was because they had some obsessions in their hearts. Dao being Heavenly Dipper wanted Su Zimo's Divine Phoenix Bone. Dao being Zephyr Thunder wanted the Purple Thunder Manual. Monk Formless wanted Qinglian and the Daming True Sutra. As for Di'in, he wanted to kill Su Zimo personally. Dao being Malevolent Earth did not have the obsessions of Di'in and the others. He had already established his Dao heart and obtained the inheritance of a conjoint body mighty figure. He truly did not want to endure such pain anymore. In the Dao inheritance ground, as long as one established their Dao heart and obtained the inheritance of a conjoint body mighty figure, no more inheritances would descend. 2 of the 6 titular disciples have already come out. To think that Su Zimo is still alive. I'm really curious how long more he can last. Many cultivators were still waiting patiently. In the Three Tribulations domain, Su Zimo traversed the extreme northern wind and went deeper. His body was already covered with cuts and bruises from the Yin wind. His originally delicate and handsome appearance had already been scratched beyond recognition. Su Zimo was completely unaware of this. His gaze was firm and unwavering. Half of the bone-corroding poison on his legs had already been removed by the bone-scraping extreme northern wind. However, the extreme northern wind could not penetrate the bone marrow of the bone-eroding poison, and there was no way to neutralize it. Su Zimo was not worried. He believed that there would be a solution. Behind him, apart from Di'in, Dao being Heavenly Dipper, Dao being Zephyr Thunder and Monk Formless were already slowing down. The 3 of them stared at Su Zimo's blurry back, their eyes filled with resentment and unwillingness. Not everyone could withstand the bone-chilling pain of the cold wind. Holding on until now, the three of them had already reached their limits. Dao, being Zephyr Thunder, paused with a grim expression. At this point, he could only give up on the Purple Thunder manual. If he, a titular disciple, was implicated and died here for the sake of a cultivation technique, he would probably become the greatest joke of the cultivation world. He chose to withdraw. After persevering for a while longer, Monk Formless could not hold on any longer and turned to leave. There were only 3 people left in the Three Tribulations domain: Su Zimo, Dean, and Dao, being Heavenly Dipper. Finally, after 4 hours, the first tribulation was finally over. In Dao, being Heavenly Dipper's vision, there was no longer a howling wind at the front. Instead, there was nothing but a desert. Su Zimo, who had arrived at the edge of the desert, strode in without hesitation. The moment he entered, Su Zimo's expression changed. Suddenly his body felt hot, and the temperature rose continuously. His entire body creaked and his bones seemed like they were about to explode. The Red Lotus karmic fire was triggered by a cultivator's greed, anger, and obsession, from the inside out. Swoosh! A ball of flames burned within Su Zimo's body and grew larger, bursting out from his organs and the surface of his skin. His eyes, ears, mouth, and nose were spewing flames. This was a sudden change from the extreme cold just now to the extreme heat. The two powers of extreme cold and extreme heat clashed repeatedly in Su Zimo's body. This was 10 times more painful than the bone-chilling wind just now. Dao, being Heavenly Desolate, looked at Su Zimo, who was already on fire but did not stop in the desert, and had a fearful expression, not wanting to follow. This person was definitely a lunatic. He chose to give up as well. Of the 6 titular disciples, Dean was the only one left. Standing at the edge of the desert, Dean grit his teeth and barged in as he looked at Su Zimo, who was burning with raging flames. Swoosh! A ball of flames rose within his body as well. Cultivators could not avoid greed, anger, and obsession in their cultivation. They would definitely be tainted with karma, and have negative karma in their bodies. No one could stop the karmic fire. Dean grunted. The pain of being burned by the karmic fire almost made him turn and leave. However, right after, he endured it with his immense endurance and walked forward, following closely behind Su Zimo. The karmic fire burned and purged the coldness within Su Zimo's body. The initially frozen blood began to melt as well. His flesh exploded under the roasting of the karmic fire. From afar, it looked like a blood-colored lotus that was shocking. Su Zimo traversed the desert and thousands of red lotuses bloomed on his body. His flesh and essence chi were withering and being burned to ashes by the karmic fire. Su Zimo's storage bag was gripped in his right palm. With the protection of the divine phoenix bone, his storage bag was safe. Enduring the endless pain, Su Zimo advanced step by step, leaving a series of blood-colored footprints behind him. As he ventured deeper into the desert, the karmic fire burned even more intensely. Su Zimo turned into a gigantic fireball that was scarlet. Not only did the karmic fire burn his flesh, it burned his bones as well. One after another, his bones were burned red and almost transparent. The marrow within was already bubbling under the heat of the karmic fire. The bone corrosion poison that had initially seeped into his bones was burned to ashes by the karmic fire. With the bone-chilling wind and the karmic fire burning, the bone corrosion poison in Su Zimo's body was completely dispelled. Sensing the changes in his body, Su Zimo was invigorated and howled into the skies in the desert. The karmic fire that spewed out of his mouth seemed like it wanted to transform into a divine dragon that soared into the skies. The tempering of the wind and fire tribulation strengthened Su Zimo's will, and he was no longer afraid. Diyin's footsteps gradually slowed down. He could not hold on any longer. He looked at Su Zimo, who was gradually disappearing into the distance with a cold expression. Even the burning karmic fire in his body could not extinguish the killing intent in his eyes. So what if you can survive the wind and fire tribulations? I don't believe that you can survive the Tao Heart Thunder tribulation. He lamented internally and suppressed the indignance in his heart before turning to leave. Su Zimo was the only one left in the Three Tribulations domain. After an unknown period of time, A gigantic lightning pool seemed to be hovering in the firmaments ahead. It shone brightly and thunder rumbled in a shuddering manner. Su Zimo had finally reached the final tribulation. Looking at the lightning pool before him, Su Zimo took a deep breath and strode in without hesitation. Chapter 10:18. The lightning pool hovered above the firmaments. Initially, it was calm without any ripples. However, the moment Su Zimo stepped into the thunder domain, the thunder pool seemed to have been triggered by something, and instantly, ripples surged violently with a terrifying might. Rumble. Thunder rumbled and was oppressive. All of a sudden, lightning flashed in a bedazzling manner. A gigantic bolt of lightning curved and appeared in the void, landing on Su Zimo. Bang! Su Zimo was sent flying by the bolt of lightning and somersaulted in midair before landing on the ground and spitting out a mouthful of blood. The pain was indescribable. Su Zimo felt like he could be reduced to ashes at any moment under the lightning pool. A sense of fear grew. However, it was suppressed by Su Zimo's Dao heart instantly. Su Zimo stood up and grit his teeth, continuing forward. Snap! Thunder exploded. A scarlet bolt of lightning descended and struck Su Zimo's head, almost knocking him unconscious. His body was already tattered after the wind and fire tribulations. Now that he was struck by 2 thunder tribulations, his life force was draining bit by bit. If he continued, he would truly die. Looking at the endless lightning domain before him, Su Zimo looked lost for the first time. Should he continue? Let's just leave it at that. The moment that thought appeared, it was magnified infinitely. It was as though that voice sounded in every corner of Su Zimo's mind, telling him to turn back and stop advancing. If he persevered, he would only die. Right at this moment, countless inheritances outside the 3 tribulations domain had strange movements, and many inheritance phenomena were produced. The light of the legacy phenomenon shone on the 3 tribulations domain and enveloped Su Zimo. There were all sorts of inheritances from the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sects. At that moment, as long as he gave up on advancing and nodded, he would be able to choose one of the inheritances and leave the 3 tribulations domain. He would no longer have to endure the pain and the threat of death. In fact, even the inheritances outside the 3 tribulations domain were very powerful. They might not be weaker than the inheritances in the 3 tribulations domain. The inheritance of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva was outside. The inheritance of the fiend sect's pure maiden sect was outside as well. Throughout history, no one had been able to clear the 3 tribulations domain. Why should I try to be brave? Perhaps the legend of the 3 tribulations domain was just a scam. Even if he cleared the 3 tribulations domain, there would be nothing inside. Lin Xuanji's master once said that he was facing a calamity. That calamity might be the thunder tribulation before him. As long as he retreated, he could avoid the calamity. Countless thoughts surfaced in his mind. He was wavering. For a moment he almost nodded his head, chose a succession, and left this godforsaken place. However, he did not. Su Zimo stood motionlessly in the thunder domain. As long as he stayed where he was and didn't move forward, the lightning tribulation wouldn't descend. Time passed by. Su Zimo lowered his head slightly and the confusion in his eyes gradually disappeared. Although his body was already broken, his eyes were even brighter and filled with determination. Su Zimo moved and took another step forward. Boom! The thunder tribulation descended. Exclamation point. Su Zimo was almost sprawled on the ground and his life force was even weaker. However, he struggled to stand up and continued forward. Boom! After being struck down by the thunder tribulation, he stood up and continued forward. It was a cycle. Su Zimo's initially wavering heart became firmer and more stable. Wind could not extinguish it and fire could not melt it. Even the thunder tribulation that could destroy all living beings could not shake his Dao heart. He wanted to clear the 3 tribulations domain not only for the inheritance within, but also to establish his Dao heart. His Dao had no path of retreat and was indomitable. Each thunder tribulation caused Su Zimo to feel the deep fear of death. However, he did not retreat. Su Zimo relied on his strong willpower and perseverance towards his Tao heart to stand up time and time again after being struck down. Above his head, the lightning pools surged, as though it was conjuring pairs of eyes that were looking at the staggering figure below. Suddenly, a dignified voice sounded from the thunder domain. "Why are you cultivating?" "I want to establish a Tao." Su Zimo raised his head and said word by word with a bright gaze, "This Tao is different from the immortal, Buddhist and fiend Das. What is your Tao?" The dignified voice asked, without the slightest bit of emotion or fluctuation. "I call it Wu Dao." "What is Wu Dao?" "Wu Dao is to advance bravely." After saying that, Su Zimo suddenly took a step forward. "Wu Dao is to go straight to the heart." Another step forward. "Wu Dao is to repay favors and take revenge." He took another step forward. With every sentence, Su Zimo took a step forward. With every step, his aura increased and his Tao heart became even more resolute and unshakable. Wu Dao is to kill decisively. The path of martial arts is about being unyielding, about resisting. Wu Dao is to be bold and resolute despite millions of people. Wu Dao is to fight against immortals and fiends and fight against the heavens and earth. My Tao title is Araki Takashi. I'm willing to establish Wu Dao and break the shackles of all living beings, so that all living beings in the world can cultivate and become immortals. The word desolate in his Tao title was derived from Tianhuang mainland and the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. The meaning of martial was Wu Dao. After Su Zimo said that final sentence, the lightning pool surged instantly and huge waves surged, as though it was shaken immensely. The dignified voice from the beginning sounded once more and shook the world. Araki Takashi shall establish a Tao and impart martial arts to all living beings. Araki Takashi shall establish a Tao and impart martial arts to all living beings. Middle Continent, 100 Refinement Sect. Extreme Fire and the others were in the main hall, listening to the news from their disciples. The current situation is still unclear. Dean and the other 6 titular disciples entered the Three Tribulations domain and have already come out. However, there's still no news of Granduncle Master. The 100 Refinement Sect cultivator said. Extreme Fire and the others exchanged glances and could see the worry in each other's eyes. Throughout history, no one had been able to barge through the Three Tribulations domain. They were afraid that Su Zimo would barge into the Three Tribulations domain in his hot-bloodedness and end up dying. Right then, a dignified voice echoed in the skies above Tianhuang mainland and spread to every corner of Tianhuang mainland. Araki Takashi shall establish a Tao and impart martial arts to all living beings. Araki Takashi shall establish a Tao and impart martial arts to all living beings. Araki Takashi shall establish a Tao and impart martial arts to all living beings. He had shouted these words 3 times. Each time it was louder and deafening. Extreme Fire looked up at the firmaments agitatedly and his body trembled uncontrollably as he exclaimed in joy, "It's Zimo! Zimo has established his Tao heart." At the same time, a black-robed cultivator broke open the cave abode and stood in midair with a blood-colored saber in his hands. He looked into the distance with a moved expression and murmured softly, Araki Takashi, Zimo, are you going to establish the Wu Dao?" Previously, when Ming Zhan obtained the inheritance of Xidagarba, it caused an uproar in Tianhuang mainland as well. However, that voice was extremely soft and only sounded once. Apart from cultivators, no one noticed it. But this time round, Araki Takashi's establishment of a Tao shocked the entire world. The 9 immortal sects, 8 demon races, 7 fiend sects, 6 Buddhist monasteries, 5 heretical doctrines, 4 unorthodox groups and countless aristocratic families were shocked. Many experts in seclusion were alarmed and came out of seclusion one after another. Chapter 1019. Who is it? Who's establishing a Tao? Araki Takashi is establishing a Tao and imparting martial arts to all living beings. How bold! This is a commotion that can only be caused by establishing a perfect Tao heart and obtaining the recognition of many ancient mighty figures. A huge change is about to happen to the entire cultivation world. At that moment, countless experts of the sects appeared and lamented. Glass Palace. A middle-aged man in 7-colored Taoist robes looked in the direction of the middle continent with a dark expression and endless rage in his eyes. Even the void around him was trembling. This was the power of the conjoint body realm that could shake the void. The surrounding cultivators, even the Dharma Daojun, were silent out of fear, afraid that they would disturb the Glass Palace patriarch before them. Ever since Dao Being Glass died in the Dao inheritance ground a day ago, the entire Glass Palace had fallen into an oppressive atmosphere. A titular disciple being killed by a Jining Jinjuan was something that had never happened in history. Titular disciples were the face of the super sects and possessed terrifying combat strength. It was rare for them to die prematurely. Titular disciples were almost invincible within the same cultivation realm. Even if a victor could be determined in a clash between titular disciples, it would be way too difficult to determine life and death. As for cultivators with higher cultivation realms, they were wary of the super sects behind titular disciples and did not dare to attack them. Therefore, it was difficult for titular disciples to die. But now an anomaly had appeared in the cultivation world. A monster incarnate. In the Dao inheritance ground, he killed Dao Being Glass with his nascent soul cultivation, and did not leave Glass Palace with any dignity. Dao Being Glass was the personal disciple that the patriarch of Glass Palace valued the most. Su Zimo isn't dead yet? The patriarch of Glass Palace's voice was cold and bone-chilling. Patriarch, the news just came from the Dao inheritance ground. This Araki Takashi should be Su Zimo's Taoist name. A Dharma Daojun said in a deep voice. The patriarch of Glass Palace was truly enraged as he grit his teeth. If that lad manages to escape the Dao inheritance ground alive, gather the mighty figures of the sect and follow me to the middle continent to kill 100 Refinement sect. I want to see if extreme fire can stop me or not. Not bad. Another conjoint body mighty figure nodded. This lad is way too monstrous and has already incurred a huge feud with us. We can't let him continue growing and have to kill him. At all costs. Patriarch, don't worry. Even if this child establishes his Dao, it will be useless. A Dao Lord said, don't forget that there are still titular disciples like Diin in the Dao inheritance ground. This lad won't be able to escape even if he has wings. At the same time, within Poison Sect, an old man with yellow cheeks sat beneath a huge venomous python. He held a jade green staff in his hand. Sect Master, we've just received news that Su Zimo is not dead yet. He escaped into the Three Tribulations domain and has already established his Dao heart, causing the world to tremble. A cultivator arrived before the old man and knelt on the ground, saying in a deep voice. The expression of Poison Sect's Sect Master turned cold and he said with a sinister gaze, that lad isn't dead yet? Let's see how long more he can live. Chaos Essence Sect. Many conjoint body mighty figures were jolted awake by the voice in the firmaments and walked out of their cave abodes. Linsong, come here. At this moment, a dignified voice suddenly sounded in the Hunyuan sect. Linsong was the Dao name of Chaos Essence Sect's patriarch. There were not many people in the sect who would dare to order a sect master as such. Soon, a middle-aged Taoist descended in front of an ancient cave abode and bowed respectfully. The existence in the cave abode was the Grand Elder of the sect. His name was Defan and his cultivation had already broken through the conjoint body realm to reach the half-martial ancestor realm. It was extremely difficult to break through from the conjoint body realm to the Mahayana realm. Although there were many conjoint body mighty figures in the ancient era when the human race rose to prominence, there were extremely few Mahayana patriarchs. Above the conjoint body realm and below the Mahayana realm, there was another minor realm, the half-martial ancestor realm, also known as the half-step Mahayana realm. Although one could not break through to the true Mahayana realm after cultivating to this realm, one was qualified to be called an ancestor. That was the origin of half-martial ancestors. Although they were only half-martial ancestors, their combat strength was enough to suppress all conjoint body mighty figures. In Tianhuang mainland, Mahayana patriarchs had broad horizons and pursued the great Tao wholeheartedly. They had long broken free from the restraints of the sect and rarely appeared. Mahayana patriarchs might only appear if the sect was in danger of destruction. This meant that half-martial ancestors were almost the strongest existences in Tianhuang mainland. In order to advance further, half-martial ancestors would enter seclusion all year round. If not for the fact that Araki Takashi had established his Tao and shocked the world this time round, Fan would not have awakened from his seclusion. Chaos Essence Sex Patriarch whispered, "Elder D, even you were alarmed?" "Yes, in the cave abode." A pair of eyes opened slowly and shone with a divine light. It was like a bolt of lightning that tore through the night sky and could not be looked at directly. "What's going on?" Fan asked slowly. Chaos Essence Sex Patriarch hurriedly explained the situation of the Tao inheritance ground in detail. "It's him." Fan frowned slightly. Dean was his grandchild. One of the reasons why Dean was so famous in the cultivation world was because of the half-martial ancestor backing him. 100 years ago, Dean suffered a crushing defeat in Myriad Phenomenon City. His protection dermic weapon shattered and he was nearly killed. He had heard about it and was enraged because of it. However, there was no news of Su Zimo later on, and the matter was left unsettled. Fan asked, "Are you sure that lad is at the nascent soul realm?" "I'm sure. That lad had just broken through to the perfected nascent soul realm at the Thousand Crane Tea Party a month ago." Chaos Essence Sex Patriarch replied. "Yes, there's nothing to worry about then," Fan said indifferently. "Dean is already at the Void Reversion realm. No matter how monstrous he is, he won't be a match for Dean. He won't have the chance to break through in the Tao inheritance ground either," Chaos Essence Sex Patriarch added. Fan said in a deep voice, "All right, you can leave. I'm going to continue my seclusion. Don't disturb me unless something major happens." Chaos Essence Sex Patriarch bowed and retreated. Tao inheritance ground. Dean had just left the Three Tribulations domain, and had yet to catch his breath when he heard a deafening sound. Araki Takashi had established a Tao and imparted martial arts to all living beings. Dean turned around suddenly and focused his gaze. The cultivators of the Tao inheritance ground were shocked as they widened their eyes and looked over. Could it be? Su Zimo actually cleared the Three Tribulations domain. The number one in history. Who can compare to such a Tao heart? The crowd rumbled and the cultivators were shocked. Right then, a bedazzling light burst forth from the end of the Three Tribulations domain. A sword came from the west and tore through the void. A spear stood tall and shattered the world. There was an indomitable figure with an immortal aura. He held a horsetail whisk in his hand and looked like a peerless immortal king with a domineering aura. A gigantic Buddha descended with a golden light that shone endlessly and Sanskrit reverberated endlessly. There were also fiend neonate shrieks that were shuddering. One after another, legacy phenomenons that cause one's heart to shudder burst forth at the end of the Three Tribulations domain like volcanoes. There were dozens of them. The entire space of the Tao inheritance ground trembled. This is... The Tao heart that Su Zimo established was actually acknowledged by all the ancient mighty figures. This meant that there were dozens of ancient inheritances inside that Su Zimo could choose from. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.